Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order here at 6 o'clock in council chambers. I don't believe we have any remote attendance, correct? So we do have several proclamations this morning, or this evening. What? One day leads to another. The first is a proclamation from Junior Achievement to declare April 7th, 2022 as JA Day. And the proclamation reads, whereas the City of Moline will observe JA Day on April 7, 2022 as an opportunity to recognize and celebrate junior achievement of the Heartland for empowering our young people to own their economic success. And whereas junior achievement of the Heartland's educational contribution equips our young people to become the next generation of productive employees and self-sufficient citizens to ensure the economic prosperity of Moline. And whereas it is fitting for parents, educators, businesses, and other members of the community to join in Junior Achievement's effort to ensure the future success and economic health of our young people and the communities in which they live, now therefore I, Sangeetha Rayapati, Mayor of Moline, do hereby proclaim official recognition of April 7th, 2022 as Junior Achievement Day. And we have a guest from Junior Achievement here. Thank you so much, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. Would you like to just... I'll make it short and sweet. On behalf of Junior Achievement, we would really like to thank the City of Moline and the support of JA. JA's dedicated network of diverse community volunteers help provide the extra support of students that they are asking for. The effects of COVID have become even more obvious as we come out of the pandemic. A new survey conducted for the Junior Achievement of teens aged 13 to 17 shows that nearly 2 in 5 feel they are behind educationally because of the pandemic. Of those, beyond 1/3 feel they are permanently behind. As we prepare to celebrate the Junior Achievement Day of April 7th, we extend our sincere appreciation to the educators, volunteers, and donors in Moline for their dedication of Junior Achievement's mission. Together, we are providing our children with the tools they need to achieve career success and financial stability. So when they grow up, they can thrive even during the most challenging of times. On a side note, we are always looking for volunteers in the classroom. So if you ever want to do that, please reach out to Junior Achievement. We would love to get you guys involved. Thank you for everything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jill,
Thanks,
can I
Jill.
ask you for your last name and your title?
IAMS.
Thank you.
Community Directors, or Community Relations Director.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Our second proclamation is from our Director of Utilities to declare April 1 through 30, 2022 as Water Conservation Month.
Good evening, Your Honor. You know, it was just a week or so ago that I was meeting with staff from Renew Moline and bragging about our region being so rich in water resources, being on the banks of one of the most abundant water sources that there is in North America. But the responsible thing for us to do as a community is to conserve water, and Mayor Rayapati has committed Moline to participate in this water conservation challenge. It's Wyland's Water Conservation Challenge, and we as the staff of the city have committed to implement ideas and promote thoughts that would encourage our community to conserve water. Conservation of water will save us money in the conveyance and treatment, both on the drinking water side and on the wastewater side. So thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate this proclamation.
Thank you. And the proclamation reads, whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas conservation of this resource will serve to protect the long-term vitality by protecting our drinking water resources, and whereas conservation minimizes water pollution and health risks, and whereas conservation reduces the need to expand conveyance and treatment facilities, and whereas conservation helps to maintain healthy aquatic ecosystems, whereas the Wayland Foundation has challenged mayors across the nation to participate in their 11th annual Water Conservation Challenge, and whereas each resident of our city is called upon to help conserve water and is to participate in the community effort to protect our most valuable resource as part of the Wayland's National Mayor's Conservation Challenge. Now therefore, I, Sangeeta Rayapati, Mayor of Moline, do hereby proclaim official the month of April 1 through 30, 2022 as Water Conservation Month. Thank you so much. I'll give that to you.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any public comment this evening? Hearing none, we move to questions on the agenda, and there are two small updates. On the cow item number 8, which is amending Chapter 8, the crime-free residential rental program has been pulled and postponed. And Chapter 4 and 5 informational, I would like us to consider, depending on what time it is, that tonight is just part 1. We can certainly continue the conversation next week, because as the deadlines for agenda happen, we would not get anything for the cow on those items for next week. So we do have time to talk, and we'll just play it by ear tonight for where we're at when we get to that informational and how much time we allot for it. Okay? So we move to our cow agenda items. Number 1, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to accept a warranty deed from the Quad Cities Rehabilitation Institute, LLC.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of council, the warranty deed that is in question this evening is specifically to allow for the city to acquire additional right-of-way from the Moline Quad Cities Rehabilitation Institute, which would allow for us to maintain a bike path that would be installed by the developer as a part of a development agreement going forward.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman O'Brien, second by Alderman Went. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 2, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Bettendorf for shared maintenance of the I-74 recreational trail and aesthetic lighting.
Move to approve. Second.
Hang on, can we have his intro?
I was grateful
Or are you just
when
trying to
that's-
save time, be efficient?
I was
Say
grateful.
anything?
I will be short and sweet. Mr. Kuhlenbeck has worked on this with Rod Schick and other members of staff for some period of time. And as a result of those discussions and agreements dating back to pre-construction of the bridge, this would allow for maintenance of the bike path across the new I-74 bridge, as well as maintenance of the decorative lighting that is on that bridge going forward. And I will add that the eastern-bound lane lighting will be going in place very, very shortly, and we should expect to see the path open in April.
Thank you. So that motion was from Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman O'Brien? Or yes? Okay, thank you. Discussion. Question, Mr. Walden.
Bob, has staff taken a look about the costs related to the maintenance for snow removal? Are we going to have to purchase equipment? Are we going to share equipment with Bettendorf? Have we taken a look at that yet?
I think staff has been engaged in discussions about the maintenance of this. It's 18 feet wide, basically, so it's even greater than a travel lane. So I know during the first 5 years of maintenance, Bettendorf plans on actually having equipment that they would use to do snow removal and basically displace it off of the bridge, probably down to the water below or to the ice below. In terms of shared equipment, I'm sure that could be arranged because there's no sense in having 2 pieces of equipment.
Thank you.
It is a concern, though.
Yeah.
Anything else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 3, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a licensing agreement with Indica Estates Condos, HOA, to install a line of trees and shrubs on the 53rd Street and 38th Avenue right-of-way at 3728 53rd Street.
Briefly, we're bringing back the finalization of a longstanding issue related to the condo association at Indica Estates, and they are requesting simply for the licensing agreement to proceed with without any fencing and strictly a hedgerow along the edge of the back of the curb on 53rd Street.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Waldron, seconded by Alderman Timian. Discussion. Mr. Moyer.
Right, thank you. So that's a pretty steep hill.
Yes, it is.
And are they going to need to build retaining walls, or do we expect those trees to, the shrubbery to? Because I mean, it's a, what would you say? It's like a 60-degree.
Yeah,
It drops off from the, and it's a tight. It's really difficult to drive in there. If you drive in to check it out and try to back around and come out, yeah, you wouldn't want to have a bigger vehicle, I don't think.
Mr. Waldron.
they had arborvitae trees there before.
Yes.
A couple of them died. You know, they were the ones that requested them to come out from the state. So the state took them out for them, and then the state made that angle on the John Deere roadside. Will they grow? I don't know, but I think at this point they're after anything they can get, obviously, because the fence idea didn't work for them. And on the 53rd Street side, they used to have shrubs and some trees on that side too. And during the construction, they had those taken out too.
So just to follow up then, is this something that they're satisfied with? Because one of their concerns was it'd be very easy for someone to accidentally hit the gas or something when reversing and go down that embankment. They were looking for a wall or something that would create security. I'm thinking maybe a guardrail or something. I don't know. Were they happy with it though?
I will say this, that in all the communications and with the change of leadership over there that's taking place as well, a new president, that the only request was for this hedgerow, which is the arborvitaes, which at one time were there. If you look at the old Google Earth pictures of that area, it was actually heavily landscaped. It was actually quite attractive at one point, and now it's just laid barren. So this hedgerow just runs literally along the entire backside of the curb. That's all they're looking for at the present time, and I would recommend approval.
Mike, excuse me, Alderman Went.
Yeah, whatever. Thank you, Aaron. So I had a little bit of communication back and forth with Joe on this, and I shared some of these concerns. And to give a little bit even more background, probably 2017 or something like that, I think the city wound up having to spend somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000 to fix some erosion issues on this area, and that was before the construction and everything. And so, so because of that, and there were some issues with some of the trees that would die and everything. So, what I would like to see in this, and Joe said, "Well, bring it up at the meeting," is 2 additional provisions in the agreement. One, that if they go down this route, that they are then going to be responsible for those trees replacement, keeping them healthy and alive, so we don't wind up with an issue where there's a change in leadership. This guy plants them all in, and then the next guy's like, I could care less, and you wind up with holes and dead ones and those sorts of things. And then the second provision is that we are relieved of any erosion responsibilities on that hill, because while trees are supposed to help with erosion, you also run into the issue with arborvitaes of the acidity. If they go, and you're not going to have grass growing sometimes underneath the arborvitae, and that, which may exacerbate it. I'm not a landscape architect, but so I guess I'll make the motion that we add the 2 provisions. One, that they take care and ensure that that all plantings remain alive and are replaced if they die, and 2, that the city is relieved of all erosion responsibility, and that the condo association would be responsible.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay, amendment by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Waldron. Discussion? Yes.
And with that, obviously, that is not the verbatim language. That's a direction to staff to put 2 provisions in that execute.
It'll come back.
Yeah.
We'll have legal do that.
Question, Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around the, and I had this question before we were in here, but it's even more valid, I think, on the amendment is, when we think about these trees, I mean, the only reason we have a say here is because they want to put it into the right of way. I'm reading that correctly?
Yes.
And that gives us kind of that opportunity of why we have, could tell them we want them to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly agree on the certainly agree on the erosion piece, because if they're causing a problem, I don't want us paying for it. But when we think about like on those trees, because would that be that like would removing a dead tree and leaving it blank space, not necessarily replanting it, satisfy to your, what you're trying to say is, or what the amendment is? Because to my mind, I think saying that if they at least are removing the dead trees, I have some trouble trying to police how many of their trees they keep alive is, in my mind, what I'm struggling with.
So are you saying this is a language question? Like, do you want it to say something more than must maintain the plants as alive? Or
I'm throwing it in sort of as a free for. I'm curious of other members of council, their perspective on how much authority we should be exerting to step up and say you must keep these alive or remove dead ones, or where we should draw that kind of line. I guess is the question.
I saw a hand from Mr. Wemp, but I see Mr. Macias and Mr. Waldron as well.
Forget me.
Okay, Mr. Macias?
I would just say maybe we tell them that we're willing to do it, just like Alderman Went said, but they're responsible for them and they have control. Because if they die, they could choose to do something different or totally do away with them later in the future. And that's not on us to decide. So it's like giving them control over that, in my opinion.
But we're not ceding our right of way. We're asking for them to be particularly responsible in our right of way. So they would still have to come back to us for anything else they would want to do. So it's really about maintenance and erosion, period. Yes, Mr. Wynn?
Yeah, I think that, and I appreciate the comment, and that's where I was kind of see what staff comes back with, and we can workshop it at that point. But overall, I guess my take on it is if somebody's going to put in some landscaping and stuff in the right of way that our residents are going to drive by and see on a regular basis, that, and we're giving them the authority to do that in our right of way, that I don't think it's unreasonable for them to then take on the responsibility of making sure that that is aesthetically pleasing for our residents on a regular basis. I mean, if all of a sudden you wind up with a jagged missing teeth so often and it just looks unkept and that you know, I think Joe's comment was we do have a provision in our right away that the adjacent property owner has some responsibilities. I just wanted it, I mean, that's already in there in our code. I just wanted it in this agreement so there's no misunderstanding before they put the stuff in that this is your responsibility. You've got to keep these things up and that you've got to make it aesthetically pleasing for our residents.
So I would ask Mr. Vitas then to make sure that Mr. Kuhlenbeck communicates both the, yes, if this passes, you can have this right of way to plant, but that also reference the code, right? That reiterates that it's both of those pieces of information they need.
Okay, Mayor. I'm looking at the licensing agreement itself and the two issues that were brought up. The erosion control is not really discussed in the licensing agreement, but would be added into the agreement itself.
Correct.
And then in addition to that, the issue of maintenance responsibility and nurturing of those shrubs and replacement of those shrubs in kind, as opposed to anything else, because the landscaping plan they have attached is specifically for 60 specific arborvitae variety to be installed there that were selected by their landscape company. And then we would make sure we clarify that, so that's exactly what's in here. So they can't go in and replace it with some other bush or some other tree.
Well, and also
to maintain a hedgerow, basically.
Right, and the first part of it is that it then remains what they're installing. That
Precisely.
if something dies, that it's replaced. And
Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Okay. I'm good.
All right. So we're voting on the amendment to include these two parts on responsibility, nurturing, and erosion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, that motion passes. But that amendment passes. So we're back to the original. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 4, authorizing the purchase of 32 rugged laptops, tablets for police vehicles.
Mayor and members of council, the staff is looking for approval from council to go ahead and allow the IT manager to purchase 32 Dell Latitude rugged tablets from Dell Technologies for $83,680. This would replace all of the existing laptops that are currently in all of the squad vehicles.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Moyer. Discussion? Mr. Waldron.
Is there any value in repurposing them to some other organization, David, or are they just past their prime and not worth it to a small city?
Engineering.
Probably not to resell, but yes, to reuse in public works vehicles.
Utilities or
They
engineering?
are gonna start actually trialing, having them out. So, yeah, they will be reused
Thank you.
for the most part. What we can piece together, double the memory in them, new hard drives, that kind of stuff.
Great. Thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 5, Land Bank Program Manager.
Madam Mayor and members of council, we are happy to present you with the job description for the position of the Land Bank Program Manager, who will head up the efforts to implement the Land Bank program between the City of Moline, City of Rock Island, and the City of East Moline. This would be a full-time employee of the City of Moline. It is compensated ultimately by all 3 cities. The City of Moline in the first year, and then in the subsequent second year and the third year, we receive full cost recovery for the position, the way it was set up in the agreements initially. So we're recommending approval of the job description as presented.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Alderman O'Brien, seconded by Alderman Timian. Discussion? Yes, Mr. Moore.
Thank you. So this will be, so we're gonna put the job out, right? So we're gonna be looking for the person.
Correct.
So the next item, number 7, are we actually gonna have that board in place to then select the candidate, or are we going to be selecting that candidate?
That's a great question.
'Cause I would hope that the board that's going to be appointed would do it.
Yeah, I mean, as an employee of the city, this position reports to the CED director in terms of their employment relationship to the city, but they have a relationship to this governing board, this multi-jurisdictional governing board, and I would be not adverse to them being engaged in aiding in the selection of this candidate. We have enough candidates to hire, so that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I was gonna say, I did ask that question of Administrator Vitas about, the amount of positions we're still interviewing for, and that, some of them are significant to our full functioning and stabilization, and so any sort of work on this would have to be very carefully coordinated, in my opinion, behind those things that we really need, because A, it may take time to put the governing board together, and B, we have positions we have got to get hired. So we want to see, I would imagine you all as the councilmen want to see this program get going as quickly as possible. We just simply, if we are the ones taking on this task through our HR department, then we also have to balance it with our other priorities for staffing. So,
Yeah, I just wanna see that this person has a relationship with that board as well. So,
any
Yeah,
other
person.
comments? Yeah, Mr. Went.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to that point, once we pass this, because it's already been passed by Rock Island and East Moline, that if we maybe move forward with getting the group together, the governing board, maybe a conversation could be had with Rock Island's HR department or East Moline, where they could assist in maybe the search. Now, obviously, they're going to eventually become a Moline, but maybe take on some of that burden, because I don't want a situation where, because we've got, I don't know, what, 35, 39 open positions, where this winds up getting put on the back burner, and it takes until next
We can-
January for it to get
Yeah,
hired.
I'm sure you and our director will be able to talk through how to proceed
because I think we've made a somewhat of a, if this is the route it's going to go, it's going to be a Moline employee. These other communities that we're partnering with, we say, oh yeah, hurry up, let's pass this. We've created it. Now you get in line until we feel like eventually hiring somebody.
There'll be
That's-
some balance to
yeah.
strike, so we appreciate you
Yeah.
looking into that.
Yeah, we will work out the details on how to best get this position filled as promptly as it can be filled, and that board, subject to approval of the IGA tonight, that board gets constituted quickly, because it's important. And people who are probably, well, I can bring it up during the next item. How's that? We'll stop there.
So any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Number 6, Land Bank IGA and bylaws. Mr. Vitas.
Sure. And KJ, you can, this has been your baby since the beginning, so you might as well come up and take all the credit for all your hard work, because I really appreciate what you've done here. But yeah, we do have in front of you the intergovernmental agreement and the bylaws for the soon-to-be constituted Illinois Quad Cities Land Bank Authority, which is designed to, one, revitalize our neighborhoods, increase our property values in these neighborhoods, and stabilize our real estate markets here on the Illinois Quad Cities between the three cities. And with that, I'm going to recommend approval and then turn it over to KJ for final thoughts.
Thank you. Regarding the job description, the way that this committee's been meeting for about 13 months now, bi-weekly. And the two lead people on the committee for East Moline and Rock Island, they're going to allow Moline to hire the land bank program manager. They've given us that authority. That's something that we have worked out internally. The two that have been on the committee will probably be the two that are going to be on the governing board. So it won't be the mayors. As in your agreement, they're going with their designee. So again, we've been meeting 13 months. They have allowed us to write the job description, and I passed it through HR, and I passed it through the city of Rock Island as well as the city of East Moline. And they're okay with that job description, and they're okay with Moline doing the hiring of it. But regarding the land bank, tonight we're asking for your approval to create the 9th Illinois Land Bank Authority. It'd be called the Quad Cities Regional Land Bank Authority. It'll be the city of East Moline and city of Rock Island. With the budget there, you guys opened up your wallet here and afforded us $250,000, so we wouldn't be coming out of the gate in the red, and so we certainly appreciate that. And whatever East Moline and Rock Island used the first year, they will pay back to us the second year, is basically the agreement on that. On your chairs, I did set a comparison chart. We have so many different IDA grants. And can you bring Brent up for me, please? I have my consultant on the phone too.
There he is.
All right. Good evening, Brent.
Good evening.
So with
Can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you. With the APP 5 and the SCP with Strong Communities Property 1 and 1.5, those are both IDA grants. And basically with those grants, we don't have to own the property. So we can go on and we can demolish the structure and then return it to the property owner. With the land bank, we have to own the property when it's all said and done. We want to repurpose it. We want to get it back on the tax rolls, sell it to the adjacent property owner, maybe for the cost of filing the paperwork at the county building. Right now, Rock Island has about 200 vacant lots. They have a lot of infill lots in Rock Island. They need some help marketing those and selling those. With East Moline, they've given me a list about 13 or 15 properties. And then I did ask our legal department for a list of our current vacant properties. To my knowledge, they're working on that. So on your chairs, I put the list that they gave us last year. So I'm assuming it's around that same number. But until we get that updated information from them, I don't know that for sure. So I'm gonna turn it over to Brent. And Brent, do you want to add anything to that, or?
No, I'm happy to answer questions. Essentially, there's contributions that are being made by each of the members. So each member is contributing based on a formula. that's roughly based on population. So Rock Island and Moline have similar contributions, and East Moline is slightly lower. But Moline has taken the position of helping to seed that first year, which we've seen from the other 8 land banks is critical to having this group actually be effective. To have some money going in the first year while it gets its feet going and starting to get properties in and out of the land bank. So someone needs to step up and make a loan essentially that will be paid back by the rest of the land bank, by the land bank communities and their contributions in year 2 and year 3. But I'm happy to answer questions about what the sources of funds and what the land bank intends to do. But in general, the land bank is going to help identify abandoned structures in the city of Moline that hopefully could be saved and provide new housing for new families or new businesses, put them back on the tax rolls, and to eliminate the barriers that currently are keeping them from the market. Notably, it's old liens, mortgages, and tax debt. And so the land bank uses tools to take these properties through the Illinois statutes and out the other side to have clean title and a process that can then sell these with a joint team used for the other municipalities because it's the same process. And hopefully you create some value, can capture some of that value to pay for land bank operations and help to dramatically diminish the amount of money that the city has to spend dealing with these properties, let alone the loss of quality of life in those neighborhoods.
And one thing to keep in mind, the city of Moline, we've been doing land bank activities for over 40 years. We've been very fortunate to be a CDBG entitlement community. So every year we're guaranteed funds. And then from those funds, we create our own programs. So I know in the past, we've had programs to address dilapidated garages that we've helped take down in different neighborhoods. We've been fortunate to have what's called a BRP grant, Blight Reduction Program. I think we did 8 properties under those, and then we passed those lots on to the Moline CDC. We've also had the Neighborhood Stabilization Program 2 grant, because there's 1, 2, and 3. We only got 2. There's like $3.5 million we got in that. But with that, we took Washington Square, which was a dilapidated building, 15 units previously, sat empty. We rehabbed that into 10 units, and we sold that in 2019 because the council didn't want us to be landlords. Also in that program, we acquired foreclosed properties. We rehabbed those and sold those to low to moderate income families. We also created a lot of new housing that you see from across from the funeral home down here at Trumbull Point to up on 16th Street. I mean, I think we did 13 new houses in that program. So we've been very fortunate to repurpose our vacant lots and not have so many infill lots. But you don't want a community of all infill lots. You want to repurpose those. I'm currently working with a nonprofit on a possible community garden for one of the lots and show that collaboration. Trying to have some end uses, so we're just not going to have infill lots out there. But I think it's crucial that we hire the land bank program manager as soon as we can. One being, we're ready to roll this out. We've been talking about it for 13 months. We kind of have our place in line with the HR department. Then on top of that, what our current funding for the land bank, there's 3 sources going into it. One being the money that we got in the first round of the land bank, which was $51,500. Well, we spent some of that money because we did a feasibility study. And then we're currently, we have 5 contracts where we're doing demolition, our asbestos, our utility disconnects. So we're spending that money as we speak. And then another item on the agenda, we just got another $50,000. But with that being said, all that needs to be used by the end of August. August going into September, they gave us another 6 months extension, which is not a lot of time. So if we wait to hire a land bank manager, that slows down that process. Just kind of keep that in mind. But yeah, between Britt and I, we can certainly answer any questions for you. We think we're at a good place to roll this out. Like I said, we've been talking about it for 13 months.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All right, so, Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Moyer. Discussion, Mr. O'Brien.
I just want to thank KJ, your work on this,
Thank you.
and the work you've done in the past. And I was around years ago when we really had a lot of problems with abandoned properties and absentee landlords and all of that. And I want to thank you for all your hard work on that. I guess my question to Brent is, And I know that you've speeded up the process. Do you see this as accelerating the process? Because it seems like sometimes we, because the law moves slowly, and that there's a lot of good reasons that it does move slowly. But sometimes it just seems like if you've got an abandoned property, it just, in my experience, this is going back years ago, it sometimes can take a long time. And I think I know what property I'm talking about right now. You guys probably all know.
It starts with
There's,
an M.
yeah, it starts with an M, former president. Assassinated around the turn of the century. Do you see this as there's a lot of great tools with this. Is that a way to accelerate like an issue that we'd have with a big abandoned building?
Yes. Yeah, and that's one of the key benefits the land bank will provide is it's going to provide the most streamlined path to acquire and repurpose a property like you're addressing. So the same tools exist across the state to intervene and acquire title. There's various touch points that a government, a city or a county would have on a property like that, and the land bank essentially tries to pull all of that together and put together a plan for a specific property and then have the team in place to wake up every day and implement the plan. So we work generally with municipalities who have programs like this for a while, but once they have a land bank to partner with, that's their main benefit. It accelerates this and it gets a lot of properties going, and it increases the scale. You can't have KJ's got a full plate, and if she's getting to this on the spare time, you're going to get through a couple properties a year. But at the scale you need and the pace you need a team working on this all the time. But every municipality doesn't need to pay for their own staff to do this all the time. So that's what the land bank concept is: bringing one team on behalf of multiple partners to do this every day for them.
And one thing that I would like to do is give credit to Brad Holman and Amy Saunders. We've been doing land banking for a long time, but we've been doing it as Moline. Now we're moving towards a regional approach, bringing everyone in. The city of Moline doesn't have a housing department. Rock Island has a limited housing department. And we still have been in discussions with the city of Silvis, Rock Island County, and Village of Milan. They're trying to see how it's going to roll out before they say, oh, include us in. But David Silverman wrote the IGA, and he wrote it in a way where people can join at any time. So just keep that in mind. And so basically, we're taking the model that we have in place for Moline, and we're putting it our regional approach on.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, comments? Mr. Wendt, then Mr. Moore.
Oh, I just want to thank everybody for doing this. This is something, I think I listened to Brent on a Quorum Forum podcast years ago talking about this, and calling up Rockford and Vermilion and getting those sorts of things. But to bring this here to the Quad Cities, there is such a need. And exactly to Brent's point, the economies of scale, the expertise of doing it every day is really going to make a difference. And to your point, KJ, getting somebody in place that we were talking about as soon as possible, somebody who's aggressive, who knows what they're doing and can move these things forward. This can really move the needle in our community, rather than some of these properties sitting there for 5 to 7 years before they finally get taken care of. If we can get them done in the third year, that's 3 to 4 or 5 years where they aren't sitting abandoned and getting worse and worse. They're actually, the economy of getting them early, they're worth that much more. They're that much easier to turn and flip and get back on the tax rolls. And so this is going to be a real game changer. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Moore.
one thing to remember, our boots on the ground will still be the land bank program manager. We'll get information from Brad. My staff is going to be helping out with bidding and environmentals. It's going to be a team approach, but the land bank manager is going to take the lead on it.
Okay. Mr. Moore.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for getting this thing done. Thank the team as well. This is a really powerful tool. We're real excited about it. What happens if it's not? What happens if it's not producing the kind of results that we want? Do we have provisions in this to go back and, because it's going to be an independent board to some degree. do we have the, to look back on it after a year or two and say, this isn't doing, the great things that we wanted to do? Do we have any like provisions in there or is it just, I don't know, that's my question.
We did put some provisions in the IGA. At first, we were doing a 5-year budget. We scaled that back to a 3-year budget to be in line with what Moline's doing with a 3-year budget. There are provisions if someone wants to exit, and there are provisions if someone wants to enter. So with the board right now, that's a 3-member voting board, but then we can have non-voting members on it. So say we want Joe Coolen back. He can't vote, but he can certainly give us expert advice on situations like that. But yeah, there are provisions written into the IGA for that. Probably Moline will probably stay in there since we're the lead on it. One thing that we're finding out from IDA, with their grants, they don't mind cities coming to them, but they want to see more of a collaboration on the grants. It seems like we're going to be, probably our chances are going to be better applying as a land bank versus as an independent city now. Like I said, we would be the 9th one in the state of Illinois. So,
and just to piggyback on that answer, so each community has their representative on that independent land bank board. You can change your representative at any time. At the next meeting, you can send someone else in and pull back your representative. Your representative represents this board, this council. And so the council, the representative should be coming back to this council and explaining what the land bank's doing. If you're not happy with what's going on, you work through your representative and get that message sent. They have a vote on the board to change what's going on. You can bring in the land bank manager to explain what's going on at the land bank. And then ultimately, as KJ mentioned, if you don't find this to be effective and want to go a different route, you can pull out of the land bank. But there's plenty of tools short of pulling out a land bank to voice your opinion from the council. The reason why it's an independent board to operate is to make it nimble and be able to operate without running everything through city council meetings. But you certainly are there in spirit through your representative, and they're using your authority, and you can act to your representative or change your representative if you're not getting results.
Thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
We move to number 7, amending Chapter 1, general provisions of the Moline Code of Ordinances by repealing Chapter 1 in its entirety and enacting in lieu thereof one new Chapter 1 dealing with the same subject matter. Mr. Vitas or
I would turn
Ms.
this one
Casablas?
over to legal counsel.
So at our last meeting, we reviewed this chapter and its updates, amendments, listed correctly so that we expand the definition of gender, which we did. You also raised ultimately the issue about whether the sidewalk definition was appropriate. We went back and looked at it, and we believe that as a definition of sidewalk, that it is appropriate. Now, you had mentioned, yes, and others, about including a multi-purpose path or a bike path. That is likely most appropriate. It's a separate definition, which we could certainly add. Which brings us then to the question of, which you also raised other whether we should just expand this entire section to be somewhat of a general definition section, to include maybe a multitude of terms that might be in our ordinances. And we looked at that and thought, well, where do we stop with that? So we feel that it's likely best, our recommendation is that I'm not even sure how these definitions were chosen for this section. If anything, I would suggest that we maybe get rid of all and then just utilize they belong. Or, yes.
I would concur with that.
So that would seem to be the simplest answer.
Okay. We have not motioned or seconded for discussion yet.
Okay, I'll move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve by Alderman
Second.
Nguyen, second by Alderman O'Brien. Discussion, Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, and I agree with you, is, because I got your email back, said, hey, well, this works for this, but then I went and there's other places where sidewalk is defined almost the exact same, but not exactly the same. And then close to that, there is a bike path defined that seems to be very close to what a sidewalk is, other than it's saying not for pedestrians. And so I agree with you. I understand where maybe in this definition is, as you're coming in, it's kind of like at the end of a contract where you say, hey, the singular is plural and the genders can be intermixed in this document, that a couple of them at the beginning that run through the whole thing kind of as a setup for how the entire ordinance is supposed to be read. But I agree with you. It just seems like a hodgepodge that we decided to define a handful of things up in one, but nothing else. So it's either this is our definition section, or we only do the definitions that apply to each one of those particular. And I don't know what the right answer is, because we ran into this issue a couple of years ago where sidewalks in Chapter 34 and Chapter 20, they completely conflicted with each other on what the width had to be and those sorts of things. And so that's why I was hoping through this process we would come up with a solution so we don't have conflicting things.
So just to clarify, in some ways you're saying we could get rid of this whole section and only have definitions of terms that are appropriate to Chapter 1. And just like you do with grant applications where, or loan applications where everything's laid out that's appropriate to that particular thing. So that's what you're suggesting, it might be a better way to go. And you're saying that's a good way to go. Okay.
We just have to do it one way or another.
Right.
The only problem with that is we have to then be very diligent as you're going through, because, you know, sidewalks, for instance, are going to be in multiple chapters.
Right.
And so do you define it in each one of those chapters the exact same, or then that's where you kind of get back to my original suggestion is maybe you just define everything up front, you pull it from each one of these things and just have them all in one location. So when somebody's looking for what the definition of incidental is or primary, you look in the front and then you've got it.
Yes, Ms. Christopoulos.
Thank you. So the problem with that approach, in my mind, is that sometimes too, the words are defined differently for different issues, such as primary. Even within Chapter 4,
Yeah.
it has a couple of definitions.
Mhm.
So I still believe, and it's still my recommendation, that we don't try to define words for the entire code of ordinances. Frankly, I'm not really sure why sidewalk was.
It seems weird.
But be that as it may, there are words that may have different definitions, which would only, I think, exacerbate confusion. Now, I do agree that you don't have to raise your hand.
Oh, I forgot where I was for a second.
But what I was going to say to finish my thought is that we are aware of, as we review chapters, that we do have to cross check.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say is we should just be very clear anytime we know there's a difference in definition, that to put a statement in that says this is different from where you see it in previous, whatever
Right.
section.
Or for purposes of
This
this
chapter.
map.
Correct, that's what, yeah. Okay, Mr. Timian.
Just out of curiosity, there are a number of terms defined, such as mayor and county. Or is this like we're covering ourselves, or is this just someone being overly, I don't know, descriptive? Like, I don't see the value in that. Obviously, the mayor is the mayor of the city. Why is there a definition for
I just don't.
that? Okay.
And defining something by using
The same word.
Same
yeah.
word, yeah.
is insane.
Right, so
It's
I
old
don't know the intent, I wish I did, because that might give extra insight.
But, okay, all right. Any further?
Well,
Mr. Warren.
as it pertains then to this definition section, I'd like us to move that we direct staff to relook at this and come back to us with, you know, the
ones that
approach
are actually
that
legally
needed
necessary.
here, yeah,
For chapter 1.
for chapter 1.
You got
So
Did you
I'll
get
make
that wording,
motion.
Madam Clerk? The motion is, or the amendment is to have staff come back with definitions specific to chapter 1 usage. Is there a second to that
Second.
amendment? Second by Alderman Schmidt. Discussion, Mr. O'Brien.
Bob had his hand up.
Oh, I'm
first,
sorry.
I guess.
I'm sorry, I did not turn fully
It's,
to let
I'm
me
gonna
see
get you a mirror for there and a mirror for
Like an
there,
organist.
like a car, so you can see it, side view mirrors.
What is your comment?
I guess my comment is in looking at this closely and hearing the discussion tonight and having worked with multiple, municipal codes through the years, I mean, the general provisions section is pretty standard language, and ours is uniquely written. I think that's my impression from looking at this a little closer tonight. Sidewalks versus streets, mayor. I mean, I get some of it because I've seen it before. But I'm thinking when we bring this back, it might be an entirely a rewrite based upon protocols I've seen or we've seen elsewhere in the general provisions of a municipal code, and I think it would simplify this because I think you're right. We can't sit here and define everything. That's impossible because the code is loaded with words that require definition, and then it's whose definition is right or wrong. And if there's things that need to be defined within an ordinance, within a chapter, that's probably, as you suggested, Margaret, where it belongs. But I think a rewrite, bringing it back, would be much better than
Can I ask
dealing
for
with
some
what we have on the books.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that this is
Replace and
not
repeal and replace.
simply an amendment to remove any definitions not pertinent to chapter 1, but it's actually rewriting some of the definitions that are pertinent?
It's just directing staff to come back with what they think is appropriate
Okay,
regarding the definition.
so that's not
Correct.
saying the ones that are pertinent are inappropriate definitions. It's not saying that they have to
No.
be rewritten. It's up to her discretion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because
thank you.
we're still gonna have to review it and make a determination.
Right, so just
We'll
to
bring it
be
back.
clear on the Robert's Rules piece of this is technically not an
No,
amendment.
it's not at all.
It
That's
is
why I
a
was
totally
just,
separate motion. I'm sorry I corrected it that way. It is a straight up motion. And we are allowed to do that during the consideration of another motion. Okay.
And who was the second?
Schmidt.
Schmidt,
Thank you.
question?
with a,
I have a question. What happens if staff comes back and says it's fine, we don't need to do anything?
then
Then we vote on that.
How
Yeah.
we talk about that.
We talk and then we vote.
All right.
Okay, so we need a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. We still have the other motion on the table, the one that's worded here. Is this your comment regarding that?
about chapter 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 1-1109, the public service work, and then we added dash juvenile ordinance violations. So I guess, and then we took some of these things out. I think we talked about credit equal to the state's minimum wage and different things. If this section pertains only to juveniles or minors or whatever, actually in the
body of it, I don't think that it talks about juveniles or minors or anything. And if you look up at section 1102, it says catch lines, which is basically the headers, is just basically like the headers aren't incorporated into the ordinance. They're just so people can search and look through things. So I think if our intent is for 1109 to only pertain to minors and juvenile people, we need to state that in the actual ordinance itself. Is that what the intent was?
It was, and I agree.
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we direct staff to come back with language that reflects the intent of 1109.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Timian. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Anything further in chapter 1? Chapter 1.
Did you have something, Sam? Sorry. Did you have something?
I didn't see any
Oh,
other
okay. Oh,
hands.
sorry. In what is it? The accountability for the conduct of another. I think under 3C, and it basically is saying. Let me bring up my questions here. It basically is saying. Well, actually, let's go back. Under A, it says at the very end, it says or both. So a person is responsible for the conduct which is an element of the offense if the conduct is either that of the person himself or herself or that of another, and he or she is legally accountable for such conduct as provided in subsection B or both.
So that would, I'll let
She believes that state's statute.
Oh, that just is.
It's mirrored state statute.
Oh, okay.
Because wouldn't that mean that you can coerce someone while also committing the same crime yourself? That's how it reads to me. If I rob a place and I force somebody to rob it with me, I can be guilty of both the act and coercing someone else to commit the act.
Yeah.
Is that, am I reading that right?
It's like a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
thank you for the clarifications.
Yeah, that's great. So
Another, Mr. Went.
yeah, within that same section, they're under B3 basically, but you're not held responsible if you do these things. It says before the commission of the offense, he or she terminates his or her efforts to promote or facilitate such commission and does one of the following: wholly deprives his or her private efforts of effectiveness in such commission, or gives timely warning to the proper law enforcement authorities, or otherwise makes proper effort to prevent the commission of the offense. Is that also state statute? That okay? Because I mean, can we have it in there that it requires them for you to be relieved of liability, that you have to notify the authorities?
I believe this actually is state statute. I would recommend that you direct us to ensure that that is the case and if not conform
Okay,
to state statute.
I will make that motion.
Second.
Second by Alderman Moyer. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Yeah, and the reason I was asking, because I know like within the Safety Act, there's a number of things that relieve people of responsibility, and I don't know how that interacts with this part of the code, or as Margaret said, maybe we just, rather than having us write all this stuff, just say
Mirror the state
mirror the
statute.
state statute, and
That's the safest bet.
that way, as it gets amended, we don't wind up in a situation where we're having to
Correct.
adjust
It
it.
appears that it might already mirror it. That's not what I'm saying here.
But as it gets changed, that we don't have to then change it every single time if our intent is just to mirror the state statute.
Okay.
All right, great.
Anything further on chapter 1? All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That was a weak eye from
Well, I think partly because
we're confused on what we're voting on.
Well, I guess what
Because we're
I'd like to
sending so
do
much back.
is to table this till the next COW meeting
That's a
with
good
the
Yeah.
adjustments by staff.
That's the right
In
motion.
Your Honor, I did not vote, so.
Yeah, I didn't vote either.
Thank you.
So we-
We're
mechanism you need. I would take that
We're
again.
redoing that. So there's a motion by Alderman Went to table this so that we can get the answers back
To
from
the
the
next
previous
cow.
motions at the next cow. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Williams. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. That's tabled till next week. Moving on to number 9, amending Chapter 4 alcoholic liquor of the Moline Code of Ordinances, QC Quick Stop Class Double C application.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of council, this is looking to increase the Class Double C licenses in the city from 34 to 35 to allow for Innovative Landscaping and Maintenance LLC, who is doing business as QC Quick Stop, to acquire the license.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Timmy and second by Alderman Nguyen. Need discussion. Mr. Schmidt.
So, as I was reading through the full proposal materials, I was failing to understand how this is really an increase. Is it really, or is it a, because I also wouldn't want to
It
just
nets out.
give them, it nets out, and it would only become actionable when the other goes away, or does it have to temporarily go up and then come back down?
Yeah, it's tricky because the one is turning in their license,
Right.
while the other is applying. So we thought that this was the best mechanism to do. It does net out though.
So it essentially stays at 34. Yes, Mr. Nguyen.
Since we're going to be talking about Chapter 4 here soon, wouldn't it make sense to have a mechanism within Chapter 4 so we don't wind up into this weird dilemma of it hasn't reduced, but we're increasing it before it actually has reduced? Some kind of mechanism of with the approval of council, a transfer of a license at the same property address, and have an
Wait.
application process for that, and then we don't run into this.
Correct, and Ms. Kostopoulos will have an answer for you, and I have some thoughts, but based on our previous discussions about this, the limit and all of that kind of stuff.
So that is actually in our memo, about transferring.
Yeah, this one.
licenses. He actually advised against transferring licenses. And even though this may seem cumbersome, it's our recommendation that it still gives you the greatest control and the ability to actually examine the applicant as opposed to just transferring.
Because we would need, this is why we voted for it the way we did in the summer, because you still need to have a mechanism in place to have them go through all the steps, right?
But that's exactly what I said, is that you can't just unilaterally transfer it. There's a process in place in which if you want to transfer, you have to apply and get it approved by council. And it effectively does the exact same thing. You still have to jump through the hoops. You still have to come to council for us to approve the transfer. We just don't have this goofy raising it before it's actually been lowered issue.
Mr. Schmidt.
And perhaps transfer is not the right
Yeah.
word legally, but because I was wondering the same thing about just a mechanism where if a business is sold, that
They don't automatically get to do it.
well, and it doesn't risk that it opens up to anybody could apply and take that last one, but that it would allow that business to have that opportunity to apply for a license at the same location as at first. So just something like that, because I recognize, that transfer I saw from your memo was causing some other
Well,
challenges.
what we have is we have to deal with this the
Yeah.
way it is right now. And then as we're amending chapter 4, again, we can take up that question, but on the table is the use of the mechanism we have right now. Question from any of you?
What-
Yes.
I mean, or we could table it until we get this straightened out.
But that prevents a business from opening.
Well, that's the question. I mean, what is the time frame? What is? I mean, they've got to go through the state. I mean, where are we in this process?
Can you update us?
We asked him to postpone the closing for the purchase until there was an answer on this, because it was a deal breaker for him to have a liquor license to purchase.
Yes, Mr.
So along those lines, when businesses rehab an area, there's landscaping requirements in our code. If somebody's updating their building or doing those sorts of things, or a new tenant moves in and they do a build out, they may have to update the landscaping. With this transfer, I believe we have the opportunity and the authority to put on some requirements for it. If you've ever driven by this location, I mean, there's no landscaping. When this was built, my guess is there was either no landscaping ordinance, or nobody enforced it, or there used to be landscaping and they've been ripped out since and nobody's put it in. So what I would like to see is, as a condition of this approval, that they meet at least 50% of the landscaping requirements for a similar property.
Ms. Kostopoulos.
So the concern that I have with that is that those are not conditions for obtaining a license currently. So we would have to amend the code to allow for that. Otherwise, we're treating some people, some applicants for a license differently than others who have obtained license.
Thank you, Mr. Went.
I understand what you're saying, but they are not similarly situated to those others. They are requesting an increase in the number of licenses. None of those others who have obtained a license and currently have one and renew their licenses were asking for an increase in the number of licenses with the city. We certainly have the right to say, in exchange for us deciding to increase the numbers, even though we're really netting things out because we're this weird reduction and an increase, they are not similarly situated to those other license holders. So we certainly can do that. We do that all the time for special use permits, for conditional approvals in the city. We put conditions on those all of the time. And so the city, the council can, as part of the agreement to change our ordinance and increase the numbers, put conditions on it.
So that's your opinion, and as with other things, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And so the question for the council is, do you want to treat businesses differently? Do you want to make it harder for businesses to get going? That's Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, so I want to understand what would be the requirements. I mean, you say 50% of the landscaping requirements. What would those requirements be in this particular type of instance?
Right. So I guess it would be the Economic Development Department to say, but it's based on the square footage and the property. There's a point system that's required to put in trees, shrubs. There's if you know this area, there's quite a bit of green space between the sidewalk and the actual driveway, gas up area, where certainly for beautification of our community, there could be landscaping put into there. And to the point of treating different businesses differently, we do that all the time when new businesses come in, when they rehab a building, when they do any of those. We put requirements on them to do landscaping, to do stormwater retention, all of those things that existing ones that were built before that aren't required to do. This is a new business coming in, and we certainly have the right to do that, and we do that all of the time for new businesses coming in. That's the way we incrementally beautify our city.
You have one, or
I
you're
just
telling
wanted
me
to-
about Mr. O'Brien?
No, I just wanted to clarify. So are you suggesting that the onus is on the property owner or on the applicant for the liquor license? Because the business owner is not always the property owner.
Oh, correct. It would be their requirement, just like anything else. Like if somebody is putting in they're redoing the Best Buy. I don't know if they own the building or if they're just tenants there, but it triggers the landscaping requirement. How they do that is with their agreement with the landlord. It just has to be done to get your certificate of occupancy, or in this case, to get your liquor license.
Mr. O'Brien?
So with this ordinance, with this amendment,
Wait, I just need to clarify. You
What?
haven't actually
whatever it
made
is.
an amendment motion, correct? You just
No,
brought this up
we're
as a
just
point of
discussing.
We're
discussion.
just discussing it.
Yeah.
In the future, if somebody like
Makes
who's-
a motion.
makes a motion, or a company like, what's the company we're always talking about? The big liquor store that's gonna come in.
Oh, Benny's?
Or
Benny's.
Bevmo, yeah.
And I share that fantasy with you. I don't know if it's ever gonna happen or not. They would come in and say, look, we're ready to do all this stuff. It's gonna be pretty hard to turn them down, right? If they're on board with doing all that stuff, that's just another reason to say, yeah, because we talked about like raising the number if on an individual basis, right? So, I mean, I'm not gonna vote for this, but if I was, you know, there might be a little validity to that.
Yeah.
But I think you have to do it for everybody. If you can't just do it for the new ones that come in.
Well,
Okay,
yeah.
do we have new comments on this topic?
So my only other concern is that we do identify very specifically in the code in chapter 4, the requirements for applying for a license.
Correct. Well, right now, this isn't a motion, so are you ready to make a motion or no? Because we
Yeah,
don't need to go down that path if you're not making a motion or if it doesn't pass.
I'll make the motion that says as a condition of granting this increase, that we make a requirement for this property to beautify our community by meeting the 50% threshold of the landscaping requirements in the city.
Is there a second? Hearing none, that motion fails. All right, so we're back to the original topic, which is, do you want to give this license to this applicant? And adjust the numbers accordingly, which will basically make it a net change.
Call the question.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien.
Alderman O'Brien is a nay. All right,
I'm sorry, Alderman O'Brien
Was a
moved to
nay.
call the question.
yes, he called the
I did.
question
I
and
did
he
that,
was
too.
the one nay vote. Thank you. That motion passes. We're on to number 10, Strong Communities Program Round 1.5 Funding Agreement.
Madam Mayor and members of council, we are looking for approval to do all things necessary to execute a program funding agreement and to implement the grant requirements for a $45,000 grant funding program. And I believe KJ also provided some detailed information. I want to thank her for this. This was the result of a conversation today in a
Thank
meeting, and I think it's very helpful.
Yes, it is.
Move to approve?
Motion by Alderman Nguyen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman O'Brien. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 11, Abandoned Properties Program Round 5 Termination.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of council, we are looking for approval to do everything we need necessary to terminate the additional program funding to the Abandoned Properties Program for round 5.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Alderman Wentz, second by Alderman Macias. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 12, Land Bank Capacity Program Funding Agreement.
Madam Mayor, members of council, we're looking for approval for a program funding agreement with IDA to be funded for the Land Bank Capacity Program. This is a $50,000 grant funding program.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman O'Brien, second by Alderman Wentz. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 13, Amendment to Intergovernmental Agreement for the Rock River Valley Regional Sewer System.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is something that our utility director has been working on for as long as I've been sitting in his chair, and perhaps even longer. And much to Mr. Lodi's credit, we finally, in working with the Airport Authority for Rock Island County, were able to bring forward the amendment which would remove them from the agreement.
Move to approve.
Motion by Alderman
Second.
Wentz, second by Alderman O'Brien. Discussion? Mr. Schmidt?
You want to point anything out, Tony?
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around it a little bit. And basically we are absorbing them because realistically that is already what's in place, and this is really just bringing the agreement in line to the practice.
Yep, it simplifies the maintenance of their agreement going on.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
You should just point out too that their capacity reserve is still maintained, and that was their concern all along.
Okay.
And we're working on a future agreement that amends this 1977 agreement to
Yes.
to actually reflect what's really happening between us, Co Valley, and East Moline.
Government
Okay.
gymnastics.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
1977.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Number 14, Intergovernmental Agreement with the City of Silvis.
Here we go, Mayor and Council. Tony, come on back up.
Yeah.
This is something this council and the previous councils have wanted for some time. It is one of our strategic goals. It is critical that we deal with our excess capacity of water. And Mr. Lodi, in working with the administrator in Silvis, was able to orchestrate discussions which led to this intergovernmental agreement, which was put together by Mr. Mark Heinley with Ansel and Glink, which would provide for the provision of potable water supplies to the city of Silvis in their, is it the upper?
Yes,
It's
upper
the
pressure zone.
upper pressure zone, because they have significant issues there that cannot be addressed as they exist there today. The agreement itself, I think, is carefully tailored. I think that there are some revisions that Alderman Wendt pointed out, which we concur with, that should have been included. The updated version was uploaded into Granicus, so you have that. I believe a hard copy was, no, not. Okay. So it was uploaded properly into the Granicus system. If you're online, you can see it. The most significant part of those changes has to do with the greatest concern that I also had, and that's that as we extend this water from our corporate limits through unincorporated Rock Island County in front of the John Deere World Headquarters to a connection point in the city of Silvis, and then in the city of Silvis to the connection point in the park, that we have no boundary agreement with Silvis, and as a result, providing this water initially up to 500,000 gallons, up to 1 million gallons, is really for Silvis's purposes to satisfy their current needs, but then their future growth is going to place a demand on this water supply. We do not want that growth to be east of their current corporate limits as they exist, or to the west, to the west of their current corporate limits, thereby affecting either the John Deere World Headquarters property, which, as you know, is unincorporated, receiving municipal wastewater treatment from us, water supply from the city of Silvis for the greenhouse, water supply from the city of East Moline for their corporate facilities, and potentially water supply from us for their irrigation system, which is probably forthcoming. So we want them to, forever, without a boundary agreement, agree not to move to the west.
Thank you. Is there a motion first?
Oh,
before
move to
discussion?
approve.
Thank you. Motion by Alderman, second by Alderman Waldron. Discussion. Mr. White, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I saw your email. I haven't gotten a chance to review it, but thank you guys very much for making sure that gets in there. I just, and off the top of my head, is there any fear or possibility that they could go south? My concern is, we're running this because we chose, it looks like the transmission is that more northerly route. We had talked about maybe the possibility of doing the more southerly route that we could pick up John Deere Road. I don't want us to get an end round because my understanding was that was part of this agreement. If we were going to do it, that they certainly wouldn't go west, but also wouldn't go south and along that area. Is that, because I don't have in my mind exactly what the corporate boundaries are, but that's my fear, that they say, well, we're not going west, we're just going south, and then once we're south, it's not west of this, it's west of this down there.
So Silvis's current corporate boundary comes southerly on 10th Street and then makes a diagonal across John Deere Parkway and then goes toward the golf course. And so the golf course is a little bit southeast of them. So their corporate boundary goes southeast. The delineation that Bob outlined in the IGA identifies the road that is currently at their boundary. So it's
To the Rock River.
Yeah, Pioneer Road or something like that.
Yes, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Now, as an alternative, there will be a graphic. One of the exhibits will be a graphic that shows the path for this transmission main. We could draw a delineation as part of that exhibit and have Mark allude to that in the IGA itself if you think that's necessary.
Yeah, their big concern, by the way, is that we were going to extend the water and then take the golf course.
Yeah,
on the flip side,
right? And I'm okay with us, but just so that we're. I mean, if that's and I guess it's a policy decision on our part. But
yes, it is.
I'd be fine with that trade-off that we get all of John Deere Road up around over to Miller's or whatever. If we need that in exchange for a commitment that we're not going to take their golf course, I think that's a good fair trade for us. And so if we can either put in a graphic or if there's additional conversation that we give a little to get the rest of it, I think that clarification, because all of us are on the same page, but 10 years from now when none of us are in this room and none of them are over there, I don't want people to misremember.
I think we'll make sure the graphics are very, very clear as well, because I think that's what we did initially, Mayor and Council.
Mm-hmm.
We have similar graphics in our IGAs with Bull Valley and Moline.
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yeah, where in the agreement, because I'm going to be a stickler for this and not vote on it till I read it. And I'm trying to pull it up, like, where was it edited and changed? Can you help direct me there?
Yes.
Pulling it up now.
I can tell you
It's 3.9 is one of them, and 3.4 and 3.9, I think.
You have to download it.
Is that right? I know it's 3.9. Oh, sorry, 3.9 and 5.5.
Yes.
Sorry.
There it is. I was having trouble finding it myself. Thank you.
I was just kind of winging it as I was
Yeah,
going through
we
this.
should take a minute just because that came toward the later part of the day, that update.
And with that, because we've run into issues before where we'd have attachments or graphics, and then later we were told by legal that said, oh, just because they're attached they don't have any legal bearing unless within the agreement you specifically call them out and say they are effective and are part of this agreement. So I want to make sure that the language is really, really clear on that, because this is a
Maybe we could,
huge issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
just for the sake of clarity, so that everybody's on the same page, because I'm having trouble opening the document here. I couldn't open it, but I did see those changes come through on emails, which I don't have access to either. But perhaps, Tony, those two sections, if you can just read the original and then read the update, because everything else remains the same. Oh, you're looking at it off the phone.
I've got it right here if you want. Do you want me to read them?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we all need to. Mr.
Okay.
Schmidt, was that going to
So,
help you? If you
Yeah, 5.5, which is Western expansion and water service prohibited. It being the mutual intention of the parties that Silvis not use the water supplied by Moline pursuant to this agreement to facilitate future growth beyond Silvis's existing corporate boundaries as of the effective date, the parties understand, acknowledge, and agree that Silvis will neither voluntarily or involuntarily annex or all or any portion of the real property within the prohibited expansion area, nor will Silvis provide or offer to provide water or other municipal services to the prohibited expansion area during the initial term of this agreement or any extended terms. So now reading that, I would actually like that a little bit more expansive, that if we're making this agreement that they, like, we're basically having like, it's not just that they won't be using our water to do it, because I guess theoretically you could say, oh, well, we drilled a well for the new thing, yeah, or something like that. And two, that it is something that goes beyond the term of this agreement, because it's 20 years and then they could cancel and then say, okay, now we're going to start annexing through or that. The other, which is, I think, what did I say, 3 point, where it says the prohibited expansion area, the area of unincorporated Rock Island County west of the corporate boundary of the city of Silvis as of the effective date, generally described as being located north of the Rock River and west of 10th Street and west of Polinier Lane, is that right? Polinier Lane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that covers the southern diagonal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think we might want to clean up. Could we get, well, because they're doing this
Tomorrow.
next.
They're set to vote on this
Fifth.
1 week from today.
On the 5th.
So it'd probably be.
But just to clarify, this goes through Cal tonight, and we still have to get it through on the 5th as well.
It is
But-
on your non-consent agenda tonight.
Oh,
But-
I'm sorry, I forgot.
And either way, we got to come up with some language so that they can finalize
Have the right
it.
thing for next week, yeah. Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, well, and I'm looking at the map now. Is the Google map exactly correct? I cannot guarantee that, but generally it looks like that 10th Street and Palantir, however that's
It's an
pronounced,
unusual name.
that leaves one small little swath actually that they could still annex along the Rock River. Not very large, but generally that cuts them off of where they are expanded to currently. So I don't have a problem with that boundary being defined.
But it's only that they can't use our water to.
Well, no, I
to
thought
do
the
it.
first one was about it's in the second, the 5.4, or that one, but under 3 point, pardon me, thank you, 3.9. That area of unincorporated Rock Island, the prohibited expansion area, that area Okay, it defines, I see, it's really just defining the prohibited, I'm following
Yeah,
now.
There's two, yeah, it ties two pieces.
Yeah. And if the first piece doesn't, then it doesn't matter that it's not, because we're not providing it with water, we drill
Right. the
well.
So
And
Would we want to just go ahead and add that Moline will not annex the golf course? I mean, if we think that's really gonna be a big deal to them, is that something we wanna put in or wait? till
I
they
mean,
come
is that
back?
something that they asked us to put in?
No, they
Okay.
have not asked for that.
I mean, it would be difficult, I think, if we'd have to hop them. I mean, because they go, yeah. But
So let me ask the council, what is the language you'd like to use to amend this agreement? Because that's what it sounds like you're asking to do.
so, well, I guess. Let's see.
Because it does sound like you just clarified what the area was, right? My sense is that that's covering the concern. Is there a need for other language?
Well, the problem is that the prohibition from them annexing other stuff isn't airtight.
Right, so what's the language you want? Margaret, do you have any suggestions?
I'm trying to
I think that the 3.3 does properly identify the prohibited area. I think the idea is exactly right, that the prohibition, though, is that they don't use the water defined within the agreement to make the expansion. It isn't rock solid.
Yeah, so maybe what we just say is just western expansion prohibited, and then we say that Silvis will not. Oh God, it's really kind of. I mean, you have to almost start from scratch. I'm trying to.
We need to add it because everywhere we look to add, it's about something else. It's almost like an added point to the Silvis's responsibilities, or
Well, no, because I mean, this whole section at the beginning where it says that Silvis not use the water supplied by Moline to this agreement to facilitate future growth. That should all be taken out. That I don't care what the reasoning is for their growth, whether it's our water or anything else. They will not grow in the expansion zone. Period.
So would it be satisfactory if we removed the references in 5.5 to water with a capital W? And focus it on corporate growth, Silvis corporate growth?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we just say that Silvis will not grow westward or southward, and, you know, I guess in consideration for this agreement, Silvis will refrain from changing its corporate limits to the west or to the south. I don't necessarily want to give up, because that, I mean, on the bend right there, that isn't Silvis. I mean, that could be a prime development just south of the bend.
So
right
I
there.
liked how the simplicity of what you just said about will not grow west or south. Is
Yeah,
that's the language?
Just basically will not, you know, in consideration of this, Silvis agrees to refrain in perpetuity from expanding its corporate boundaries to the west and to the south as outlined in the expansion, and then from there we describe it. And then that way, it, you know, they're with the graphic, because there's some infill places where we don't care if they take those little sections, but as a general rule,
Okay, so you hand from Alderman Williams, Alderman Schmidt, and I think our administrator and director should weigh in on a recommendation. Mr. Williams.
I guess Bob, how much is this a deal breaker if you're still in Silvis? Now it's no longer about purchasing water. They're gonna constrain a city that's already
Constraint.
very.
Yeah. I think when we initially met, Tony and I, and this was before the IGA was drafted, we came up with a bunch of issues, and this was one of them. Because we have boundary agreements that restrict our growth south of the Rock River in either direction, east or west. One of course, with the folks in Moline on the west side of the airport, and on the east side of the airport, we're restricted there as well. So our growth zone is pretty much straight south, right? It's a straight shot. Once you get to a certain point beyond Rock Island County, it's anybody's game, because those boundary lines don't go off in infinity. They actually kind of stop, and they're usually stopped right about where the county double K is at. And that's kind of the limits of where the school district boundaries are. And logically, local governments like to have when they're growing, school boundaries are often larger than the municipality, and it's always, the goal is to make them match one day. And obviously that's what we're doing when we talk about growth south. When we looked over here, obviously, John Deere prefers to be unincorporated for a lot of reasons, and they've been that way forever. And they may remain that way. But then when you get into, the development along the highway, you have all this undeveloped real estate in here, which I believe is all Deere real estate right now. But that doesn't mean that one day that somebody might look to develop that on both sides of the road. And hence, that's why we said, from the point here, we were gonna bring it down, and then we're gonna tie it out on this road all the way to the Rock River. Didn't too much look at this, because there's really not much there between Carbon Cliff and Silvis to divide up. But then you have all of this property coming along the highway, all the way back to our current corporate limit. And that's what we looked at. So that's the prize we don't want to give away.
So keep the expansion zone the same, but just change the reference to it to say that it has nothing to do with water, that in consideration of us agreeing to this, Silvis agrees. I heard some people cringe when I said in perpetuity, but for 50 years or something, not to expand into the non-expansion
Delineated
zone,
zone.
which is everything that way.
I mean, logically, it's there for us to annex it one day.
Mhm.
It's there. Some of it's not even, you gotta realize, some of this is in the 100-year, some of it's in the 500-year floodplain, so you're
Yeah,
not
it's
going
not
to
gonna do
necessarily
much.
see things happening here.
Right,
very
but the 500-600
easily.
feet off of John Deere Road
It's
is some
this
of the most
road.
prime.
It's the
commercial.
water here, extended into these lots, and even further here into these properties. That's what we're trying to protect.
Yes. So as I understand it, we have the language that protects that. You just want to tighten up the in perpetuity piece of it and the water piece of it.
Yeah, I think we have the exclusion area defined
Correct.
correctly. We just
All right, so Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, and I agree with the language and direction. I think it's just finding the right section, because just adding it into that place with the resale prohibited is the article on sale and purchase of water. So I think we just have to find the right section to land that in as well. I don't think we want to throw that in the sale and purchase of water section.
yeah. It's just that's where they got.
Yes, well, and it makes sense on the resale of water portion. And on the kind of the in perpetuity or 50 years, what would be normal in a case like this as far as what we would ask for them? I mean, I'm happy to ask for in perpetuity as long as that would be within that normal range, or what we think.
Normally, we have agreements with neighboring communities that is basically, we won't go past this road and you won't go past that road.
What's your experience? What's your professional
My
recommendation?
experience for many decades is that annexation wars happen. They do happen, where there's a lack of clarity and there's a lack of agreement, the battle begins. And the only winners are the attorneys. It gets very expensive. No, it's really true.
Right.
I've settled many annexation
So what is your
disputes.
recommendation? In perpetuity or some other year definition?
I mean, typical agreements by law are 20 years. I mean, you have agreements, annexation agreements with 2 other cities right now. So the question is with Pole Valley and Milan, we have agreements that ran for 20 years, I believe is what it is.
Is it only 20 years?
I believe it's 20. I mean, there's something in state statute about these annexation agreements, like the one we're entering into with Van Acres, it's 20 years is what it says.
Well, maybe what we say is that we say that they won't do this, but also say as a provision of this being approved, that we will enter into
Annexation agreement.
an annexation agreement with them that outlines it. In that way, over the next couple of weeks, we
don't have
put
to
that
mess
together.
with the language right
Yeah.
now specifically.
And obviously, we'll get that done before we turn dirt and
I think it's just,
spend money.
I think it's in the city's best interest to just clearly define this.
Yeah.
And if this is a hands-off zone, so that they know this council and future councils, because you're right, you may not be sitting here when it happens, to avoid any future conflict of interest, because it is prime real estate.
And maybe part of that annexation agreement, we say we won't take your
Golf
Golf
course,
course.
right.
Yeah.
So does that, you look like you wanted to say something.
He has-
I wanted to answer Alderman Williams' question. I've participated in a couple of committee meetings with Silvis and also had numerous dialogues with their administrator, and I don't think this is a deal breaker for them.
So now the council has talked, I see heads nodding that an annexation agreement coming along after this is what's desired.
So maybe we write it into this agreement, together along with this agreement, the parties shall enter into an annexation agreement reflective of the exclusionary zone within 60 days of passage. So that
Is that
we,
an amendment?
no, I'm asking if that's,
Can I propose some language that
Yes,
Margaret came up
please.
with here first? That it was prior to this separate annexation agreement. Okay, so what we came up with was a new section in the conditions and limitations section 802. Pursuant to this agreement, Silvis shall neither voluntarily or involuntarily annex all or any portion of real property beyond its boundaries, west or south of its boundary as it exists on the effective date of this agreement and going into perpetuity.
Oh, that's nice and tidy.
if that's.
Does the council think so?
Boy, that sounds.
That was even more space cut off than the.
Yeah.
I think adjusting it back to the expansion zone, but otherwise I think it was right.
It sounded
So
like
do we really need to state how long this
Well, because right now it says just as long as this agreement's in place, and
And if 20 years is the normal, or if we think there's I would say to put for 20 years or as long as this agreement in place, whichever is greater.
Then
Matt.
we had to also get the phrase that clause
Survives.
the
I-
agreement.
Yeah.
That's actually excellent.
or what you say is that we will then memorialize this which is the proper place to do it. We'll memorialize this in an annexation agreement within 60 days or something like that. I think that's the better route to go, because
Well,
15 years from now, when there's an argument about it, I'm not sure if anybody's going to remember. Oh, we should look at our water agreement to define what the annexation agreement was.
To your point, if we have annexation agreements with the other surrounding communities, we might as well take care of this side
Yeah.
of the Quad Cities or of our border as well. So it's sort of a extra benefit of having gone through this agreement.
So are we not defining though what that request is, or we're defining it and saying this this will be put into an annexation agreement?
Yes,
And then if they want to bring additional terms or adjustments, we can always agree.
Agree
But we've
to
already
that.
got what
Yeah.
we want.
So we have it in there and say this will be also memorialized in an annexation.
So could Tony read, excuse me, Mr. Lodi, please read to us the full language that includes both parts, what our legal counsel came up with, and then this memorializing in an
I think I have it all.
annexation agreement.
Okay. Section 802, pursuant to this agreement, Silvis shall neither voluntarily or involuntarily annex all or any portion of real property beyond its boundaries, west or south of its boundary as it exists on the effective date of this agreement and going into perpetuity. This clause shall survive this agreement and shall be memorialized in an annexation agreement within 90 days.
Perfect.
And then
Great.
state statute still obviously takes precedent.
President, if
Okay.
it's too long, yeah.
Yep.
Any further questions?
And that'll be reflected in the annexation.
Have we, Madam Clerk, we are in the discussion phase of this, though we've made an amendment to the IGA together, it wasn't done under a motion. So do we need to move to change the language to what Mr. Lodi just read and have that seconded?
I will move to take Tony's language and make the amendment.
Is there a second? Second by Alderman Moyer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Mr. Schmidt.
I think we just created one small problem for ourselves.
Oh, God.
We have the definition of the prohibited expansion area, but we just provided a different definition than what we had originally included there. So my question is, are there any other sections that were dependent on that, or do we just need to strike that? And I wanted to go back to the one that was in the water section.
Oh, because then we also have to strike.
3.3 and 5.8.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tony, 3.3 and 5.8?
5.8.
5.8.
Thank you.
So I don't see a 5.8.
Is it 5.8? 5.
There was 5.4,
5.5.
5.5.
And
Yeah, western expansion.
yeah, 3.4.
So I move to
Okay.
strike 5.5
it.
and
Thank you,
3.4.
Tony.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Everyone's clear that that's just cleaning up, that's just aligning everything language-wise with what we just voted to
Yeah, it's
put
removing
in.
any conflicts
Your
with
Honor,
what
can
we
you
Got
say
it.
who the second was, please?
The second was Alderman Schmidt. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Question, Your Honor.
Yes.
Will this continue on the non-consent tonight, or would you prefer to see this back next
It's up
week?
to the council.
I think we could take.
We let it roll, man, let's do it.
Considering we have exact language, I think that it's fair to let it continue.
Okay, so the consensus, majority consensus looks like yes, we'll continue to keep it on the council meeting, regular council meeting. Yes, Mr.
Well, and I also move that we insert a map.
Yes.
Right, we need a motion
I-
for that.
I make a motion that we insert the map to reflect what we just voted on.
Second,
Second.
all right, second by Alderman Williams. All in favor, or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Map insertion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good teamwork, everyone. All right, we are on item 15, Rock Island County Hazard Mitigation Plan adoption.
Madam Mayor and members of council, we are seeking council approval and adoption of the Rock Island County Multi-Jurisdictional Local Hazard Mitigation Plan, which the fire chief and his staff have worked on with the county. We're recommending approval of that document.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Schmidt, second by Alderman Macias. Discussion? Mr. Went?
So I had sent some questions regarding this. One of them, it talks about, do we have a city's floodplain manager currently?
That's, Tony's been doing that work, haven't you? No, Joe, who was it
Can
that
I
I
answer?
sent to the?
Well, because I think you have to be certified, don't you?
Well, there are certified floodplain managers, that is
Right.
correct. And up until now, we haven't had a certified floodplain manager that I'm knowledgeable of. And
Sean Christ, maybe?
so Joe Kuhlenbeck has been handling a lot of the issues related to the floodplain management obligations, and he doesn't want them permanently. So as a part of as a part of the search that we're conducting in CED, we are looking for credentials like that, so that maybe we can bring somebody to the table who's already certified.
Okay.
So that would help streamline that whole issue that we're dealing with.
Because within this, it says that we have one. But,
Well, not everybody has one.
well, no, it doesn't say that everybody has one. It says Moline has one now.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have, that is an authorized position within the organization, has probably always been for a long time now, I would guess. Our goal is to fill that position and to have somebody in it. And if we can't find the right candidate for it, then we might have to contract that service. That's another option we have, is to contract the service.
Well, and I guess that was my question. Is that what we're currently doing? Because I think the county's got a flood.
I believe they do, yeah.
Certified.
I mean, they have worked together. I mean, I know Joe has worked on stuff with the county related to the floodplains.
Could we find out and get a report back? Because I think
Unfortunately, he's out of town.
no,
so
I mean, it doesn't need to be done immediately.
we'll get something back on that.
But with that, there's been, and this is ongoing, and I know that I've shared this email with a number of you guys. For a number of years, the enforcement of our FEMA required ordinances regarding substantial improvement of properties that are in the floodplain and floodway, the lifetime cap on the improvements, that if they hit a certain amount, that they are required by law to bring all habitable space out of the flood plain or floodway, and the issues where if we don't enforce it, FEMA can cancel all federally backed flood insurance in the entire city. And so this is an issue that has been hanging out there, and we've had some gaps of enforcement, or at least when there's been requests of where we are with the enforcement of things, no response or anything. My concern with us passing this is we are saying, yes, we are adopting it, because not every community adopts this in Rock Island County. I think there may only be one or two that don't adopt it. But if you're adopting it, you're making these commitments. Mm-hmm. And I'd like some commitment from staff that we will get a report back on those properties that have had substantial repairs done over the course of time, because it is a lifetime since the ordinance has been adopted. And we really look at this, because being in residential real estate, there are hundreds of homes where if all of a sudden the federally backed flood insurance went away in this community, I don't know how that they would, the value of them would completely deplete. So,
It's an adjacent issue to some that we're looking at currently
Correct.
with the updated 100-year map, which is a huge problem, and we've been in talks about that with state agencies, representatives, and things like that. So it's an adjacent issue that we need to look at as a whole.
well, I understand those, but those are those on fringes. Are you in the map? Are you then? I'm talking about properties that have been in it since the 60s. I mean, that are clearly, no question, you are at or below the flood line because you're behind the flood wall downtown. I mean, there's no question whether they are in or out of the flood zone or the floodway. They are clearly in it. And there is consistent work being done on these properties that have, over their lifetime, I don't have any proof of it, but I could not fathom that they haven't hit those thresholds. And I don't think, from the questions I've asked over the last 5 years on these things, and never gotten any, oh, we're looking into it, no one's keeping track. And that's a violation of our own ordinance and also FEMA's requirements, of which we are, by adopting this, putting our hands up and saying, we're following your ordinances.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Mr.
I'm familiar with one property that's impacted by this discussion, and that is the Heritage Church
Right,
property. I do know that we had a meeting with them, Joe, myself, Alex with Renew, the pastor, and the other folks who work with him, knowledgeable to this area. I believe it was one of them was the architect, one may have been an engineer. And in that meeting, the outcome of that meeting, this was just like early last week, that we were able to have them provide us with the actual data to the level of improvement that they had actually processed based on audited financial statements of the improvements they caused to that property, and they're not there yet. That is one example. They are working toward it, but they haven't reached that threshold yet.
Well,
And that's the only property I'm aware of, unless there's others. I would love to know more.
But that's a great example. I don't know if there's others either, but,
Yeah.
but that's a great example. And taking their audited financials in which the work done, and FEMA's very clear on these things done as gratis, things done at, all of those things count. And so
Right.
just because it's their financial data that they have spent this much does not in any way, shape, or form meet the requirement of how much improvement has actually happened there. And so, because if they had somebody do it for free, if they had some other in-kind, whatever those things are, and it's not just them. Again, it's the lifetime of the building. It's not that it starts over every time that the property changes hands. It is the lifetime of the building since the ordinance was adopted, and clearly there has been stuff before them. And so that's where we get into these issues of non-enforcement over a long period of time. And if we would have started enforcing this 5 years ago when it was first brought up, then we could have, we give you some leeway. Hey, we'll work with you, but you keep kicking the can down the road of non-enforcement, and now all of a sudden you've got all this sunk cost, and you may or may not be over. I have no idea because nobody's keeping track.
So I have a question then for the council. If we can't find a candidate who is acceptable and takes the job that has a flood manager certification, are you willing to go back to the budget and look at putting someone in that position if we had it at one time before so that this can be monitored, or look at other options with the city administrator for who could be doing that? Because clearly it's a big job and what is the right size for a city our size of the employee that does that, right? What are the FTEs that are required for that particular job in this size city? I guess that's a question for you all, because the job can't get done if we don't have the right people.
Yeah, historically it was an additional duty as assigned to somebody who was certified. That wasn't their whole job. I mean, and for this example, and it's usually in the zoning department or whatever, because there was often overlap when somebody wanted to build a house down by the river or something, so that they knew what was going on. It certainly isn't something that would be a full-time, they'd be bored out of their mind, I think.
Well, zoning is where we've been lacking in it.
Yeah, and so as part of that, as Bob said, that you make it as, an attach on to one of these people who maybe are already certified. But in the interim, certainly we should probably have the conversations with the county or somebody who does have a certified person, if we need to get an IGA with them, or hey, can you help us out with this for a short period of time until we hire somebody, whatever. I mean, we are obligated by this agreement and also our ordinance itself and FEMA's big stick if we're not enforcing this, to have those ordinances in place and enforced.
Mr. Schmidt?
So enforcement for that is looking at when a permit is pulled? Or what is that enforcement?
No, the FEMA talks about that you don't have, it doesn't have to be tied to permits, because otherwise then you're enticing people not to pull permits and just do work. You know, it is all work that is done, including all work that is done as rehabilitation because of flood damage.
But is it just a record keeping then? Is that what
That's
you're
a
asking?
big part of it.
That's
a huge part of it.
And there will be upfront, once we decide, yes, we are actually going to do this, there'll be some work upfront to gather that information, do some investigation, whatever. But once you then have that, then it's a matter of enforcing. Have they hit the threshold? If they've hit the threshold, then FEMA's real clear and our ordinance is real clear of what has to happen. If they haven't, they need to know how close they are and what happens. Because the idea with FEMA is they don't want properties with habitual issues. And they don't want people improving properties that have or could have habitual issues. And so that's why they put this 50% thing, is that flood after flood. I mean, heck, the flood of '93, when they did all those repairs when Kone owned it, or that may have been Montgomery Elevator at the time, I don't know. Those probably all count towards their lifetime thing. And so from my point, I have no idea how they haven't hit this. And that's why I've been asking this for
Thank you for sharing
years,
your
but-
expertise on this. Mr. Vitas, do you have a recommendation at this point of how to address, because I call you solution man.
I'll find a
Do you have
solution.
a way to address this concern at the moment, or you
Yeah.
can come back with that if we are approving this, or what are your thoughts?
My initial thoughts are I don't disagree with Alderman Wendt, because I've had to deal with FEMA issues even down in Florida, and they're horrendous. I mean, once you're on the wrong side of that equation, it's a terrible place to be. Right now, we're not on the wrong side of that equation. I mean, we're still fine. It's a question of records and data and what exists, you know, in our building files and permit files that have been pulled, whether it was Montgomery Elevator in this case, or Kone, or now the Heritage Church, and where those records kept succinctly in a file specifically to a building. That's the question I can't answer, because I have, I don't know where those files are. We're gonna have to ask those questions. What other properties are impacted? Because FEMA, I know what FEMA wants. They just don't want repetitive claims. This is really what it comes down to. They do not want repetitive claims on property. If there's a point at which there's a point of no return, the property gets destroyed, it doesn't get rebuilt, right? The land is reclaimed is what happens. And that's what happens a lot down in the Florida Keys.
Yeah.
So, at this point, I think I'd need to sit down with, again, CED. I need to sit down with probably Joe, because he's, he was granted this position he doesn't want. And when he gets back, he's probably watching this going like this. I know you're out there, Joe. But we'll come back with some kind of a recommendation on how to address this, because I think it's a staffing issue. It's, getting somebody on board who really can wrap their hands around it. If we can't find somebody to put on staff, then the question is there somebody within the Rock Island County region that we could contract with to do that kind of work, either as an independent contractor, or is it an agency such as another governmental agency like the county, or by state, and then talking to the folks in, surrounding communities. I want to find out how they're handling this, because we all share the same problem. Maybe there's a common solution that we could all share too, if they're having the same difficulties we are.
Do you think it would be reasonable for you guys to come back with kind of a plan by May 24th? 2 months?
You can certainly try.
I mean, I'm not saying you have it all figured out and we've
I mean,
done
we're in
all
the middle of recruiting the people that answer part of this question. I will say that. If I could find the right person that I'm not going to get into who we're recruiting right now because there's confidentiality involved, but there are those who have that credential.
Okay.
They have that credential, so I'm looking at that closely.
How about a report back by the 24th?
Yeah, we can do that. We'll give you a report.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thank you. So, any further discussion on this agreement or plan? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. We are to our informational. May I suggest we take a 2-minute recess? 2 minutes. Come back.
That's a
Okay, we are all back.
closer
Let
to
us
9:30.
continue with our informational. I'd like to suggest, as I mentioned earlier, that we manage our time well, because we're also managing staff time who are here. So, we could hopefully be at a decent stopping point on any of these discussions around 9, and then continue with the regular meeting, since we have the option for part 2 next week. Is that what you called it? Over? Yeah, okay.
I got
All
the
right,
over.
so-
I got the over 9.
Mr. Vitas?
I'm gonna take the under.
Oh, great. I'm happy. Madam Mayor, members of council.
Did you want to go down there at all?
No, it's all right. I can if you want.
No, go ahead.
You should have received last week, and I'm happy to report that our consulting company, CTC Technology and Energy, worked with my office and with the task force I put together, which represented all of the key departments impacted by this project, including utilities, public works, engineering, police, fire, information technology. Everybody was at the table that needed legal. Anyone who needed to be at the table was at the table, so that as we went through the completed task 1 and task 2 assignments of the contract we've entered into. Task 1 was the market assessment report, which is a snapshot in time of exactly what the service levels are and what's available presently here in the city of Moline. And not, of course, a lot has not changed since, a year ago or a year and a half ago. It's pretty much stayed the same. So that being said, the RFP was created, it was put into draft form, it was distributed. We took the time to go through it, both at the legal level with Adam Simon. He's been instrumental in working with my office on this. So we went through that with Mr. Talbot, who is the consultant working directly with us on this, on both tasks 1 and 2. And we put together before you an RFP, which we believe represents the city's best interest going forward in procuring a new broadband provider or providers that will deploy, operate, and maintain our broadband service here in the city of Moline. There is a great interest in this particular project. Multiple vendors have contacted us, some of whom I don't even know, who have an interest in providing high-speed broadband service, and it's basically fiber to the premise, no homes left behind, which I think which was critical years ago. It's still critical for us going forward. It would be up to a 1 gigabyte service, depending upon people's own needs or desires. They would pay for what they get. It would provide for, of course, video streaming. It would provide for high-speed internet, which is really our goal. We took it to the next level at the staff, and we included all of the traffic control signals. It was number in excess of 100 today throughout the community, so that those could be remotely controlled and monitored from the Public Works facility and programmed accordingly as necessary down the road. We included over 400 plus cameras that the Public Safety Department, in particular police and fire, expressed an interest in, as those are rolled out over time. It won't happen all overnight, but obviously there's priorities downtown, there's priorities with our schools, and then beyond that, our intersections and some of the other parts of the city, our commercial corridors, for example, and even by the mall. So we think this captures the essence of what a good RFP will do once it's out on the street. Task 3 of this process, of course, is the release of the RFP, the collection of those RFPs, the evaluation of those RFPs by CTC, and then recommendations coming back to this council in terms of what they think is the best way to move forward for the city in securing it. It is on a quick timeline. We are not allowing, much time to pass. At this point, we expect that the RFP will go out by the end of this week if approved. Basically, I'm looking for your kind of thumbs up, not a voice vote or anything like that.
Everyone's
wow.
like, yeah, okay.
Bob, stop talking. You just sold it. Okay. So I'm really happy for the input that I did get. I mean, there was input. I know Alderman Wen had some ideas, some thoughts. They got incorporated into the RFP. We're looking forward to getting it on the street and getting a response before the end of April, early part of May, so that we can come back with recommendations. And in May, this council will have the ability, if all goes well, to give them the green light to negotiate the final terms and conditions, subject to budgetary constraints, whatever those might be, depending upon the responses we get, and bring back the greatest proposal to the benefit of the citizens, which might mean no cost to the city. That is really what we're working toward, is to get what we want and get no cost to bring home, which would free up ARPA dollars for other purposes. Though they are allocated, the goal is to try and get this done cost effectively for our citizens.
Mr. Went.
Questions?
With this, we've got this criteria, the evaluation weight, and I understand it's a good mechanism to compare apples to oranges, because there may be some very different approaches there. I was hopeful that when submissions are made and the team, whoever that is, staff and the consultants, use this criteria, because there's percentages, and they got back to me on like how those kind of percentages worked, and I ran a couple scenarios, and some work and some get a little goofy, but is there the possibility that then comes back to us just to take a look at? Because the idea of what is the most important thing, we all want the best internet that's affordable for our community and those sorts of things. But I think that there's a policy decision at some point to be made, depending, and I don't know where these numbers come in at, that, at no cost. Well, if it's, there may be a number where we're willing to absolutely, if everything's buried and everything is that, and it's super cheap for our residents, then something that doesn't cost the city anything, but is all aerial and is maybe a little more expensive. And so I think that there's still some policy decisions even with this, so that the idea is that they would come in, you guys would rank them up, and before you choose something, it would come to us and say, hey, this is our recommendation, and be like, well, actually, we should weight this more than that.
Depending upon the proposals that come back. And I think the intention is that, cost is just one factor. I think service is another factor. I think timelines are another factor, how soon they can roll it out. I think there's a number of decision points that need to come back. I don't think that CTC is looking at it strictly from a financial standpoint. They're looking at it, from an overall perspective. I mean, cost being just a part of it, but then all the other issues that we speak to in the RFP being important. And whether there's one provider or more than one, we don't know right now. We really don't have that answer. But bringing it back and giving them the authorization to negotiate is when all that information comes back.
It's already built it. You're saying it's already built in the process.
Back. I would bring it back.
So we'll see it before somebody gets picked.
I want you to see the overall impact and the results, and then based upon their input, and their suggestions, because this is what they do for local governments, go forward then and allow them to actually really drive home the bacon when it comes to the money. And that's where Joanne Hunts is actually the best. She's feared. So that's
Mr. Schmidt?
That's the plan.
My concern of talking about not following through to the selection criteria or kind of playing with it later is that would get us into RFP trouble. Because if we put out an RFP, in theory, if we say these things are the must-haves, like I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't know, do we need to give 25% for full coverage to all premises in the city, or is that just a mandatory? And then we have, I think if we want to adjust the points or adjust this matrix, that feels appropriate. But my concern is that if we're kind of going back and trying to decide after the fact of what are the most important things, like total proposed cost of the city and underground construction to the greatest extent feasible are equal percentage weight. And those, I expect, will be rather inversed. And so someone would have to find the right balance of that to get more points. I just, if we start picking based on what we're seeing, that's in the private sector could serve us well, but in the public sector, I think you get us into trouble.
Do you have a recommendation?
So I agree, so maybe before the RFP is released, we build in some leeway there.
That has to be done tonight because this is scheduled for release at the end of this week.
Yeah, no, it has to be done now. We can't delay. So, I mean, I know
What do you mean by
Adam's not
leeway?
available.
Yeah.
That we can
Yeah.
make adjustments.
And if you write that into your RFP, then you don't run into an RFP issue with it. Because my concern with you, and I understand what you're saying, because I don't disagree with you. I think the 25% for full coverage, that should be allocated throughout the other stuff, because that should be mandatory. You're covering the entire city. If you need some money to do it, then that comes up to what you're asking for. That is just a given. But to your point about the percentages, well, yeah, there's percentages, but there are 100 different ways on how they could be applied. Is it a range? Like if it's $1 million, you get 0 points. If it's $10 million, or if it's $1 million, you get all 15 points. I don't know. And I mean, the what was explained to me was it was like whoever's was the lowest, then the next one is a percentage of that, and that's how many points is a percentage. But how do you do that with underground? It's like, well, we're 50% underground, we're 90% under. I mean, there's already built into it fudge factor of however those are being applied as far as percentages, and that's my concern. You wind up with a situation where the percentages are applied in a way that we look at and be like, well, that's not how I would have done it, but we're stuck now. Because
It sounds like we're, just to clarify, Mr. Vitas, it
Yeah.
sounds like we're not stuck, A, if we add
The proviso in
a
here
proviso, and B, because the process is such that you're bringing back their recommendations and they will
Correct.
explain why it's a certain way, and then we get to decide.
Oh yeah, they'll bring back the entire bid tabulation. They'll show you exactly how it all came in and how it all
Yeah.
looked. That's not the issue. The issue is getting to the point of making a solid recommendation, and we could add language in on page. It looks like 600 in this book, but it's actually section 5 selection criteria and adding a third paragraph.
Yeah,
and
there you go.
if you can ask Adam to add that and send it to me, for inclusion,
Let's do it.
however you want.
What's the language you would use?
Do you have that there on better?
I have it.
You want to say it? I'm happy
I
to
have
walk
it right
over
here.
there. I have it right.
would you be open to, or would anybody be open to basically making full coverage of the community a requirement, and then that 25% allocate over customer affordability? Because I think that's an important piece. We get something. It's great. It's wonderful, but it's the most expensive thing out there, and none of our people can afford it. That becomes an issue. And allocate those over the place. And like I said, if the comment comes back that, or maybe it's that you have to have 98 or 99% of the, because there may be one weird situation where you can't get to one.
Yeah, and that was when I was looking, because even if looking at the MediaCom map included, there are parts of the city they're not reaching that I wonder if would pose that sort of a challenge, but I don't know what their coverage looks like then.
And so,
When I'm looking at the part east of Coal Valley, but that is just hanging out there, but 100% coverage is 100% coverage. And that's sort of where leaving,
That's a
That's a
ravine.
farm.
That's a
There's
farm.
nothing.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
there's
That's a
like 3
ravine farm.
houses
There's
in
no-
that
yeah.
spot. And one's not even occupied, I don't think.
But, and
Is it
then, so I
Turner
don't know how we could, if that's, what, so we set up to the contiguous city of Moline,
Mr.
or?
Macias, you have a comment?
Yeah, so for instance, let's say, we don't get any that can do full coverage. It looks like MediaCom pretty much has the biggest, coverage. But, or there, in some areas, some might have some areas and others might not. It's almost like you gotta weigh it, like judge it, where, well, you're not gonna have this much, but you do have, or this area, but you do have more coverage in these areas. So I don't know that that's the right scale for that one, because what if their maps might differ on coverage?
Or or if we pull it back, I think we'd have to define it as 95%.
Yeah. I mean, certainly not like, let's cut out Forciente, which is what the last proposal was, which was offensive, and so.
Yeah. Because if they had, that looks like the MediaCom map, where there are still some missing sections, but I bet there's not a lot of residences, most likely.
So let me get this straight. Mr. Vitas,
Yeah.
the goal of CTC and an evaluation like this is to cast a wide net,
Correct.
a wider net. So it's best that we maintain that ability with this RFP and the ability of professionals to tell us what the best path forward
Because we
might
could
be.
bring 2 providers, theoretically.
You
2,
could.
Is that right?
You could.
Right.
Very
So-
possible.
I just want to make sure that that's what's behind this. And if we put a proviso in that you might have ready to go now,
We have
after
a better
talking,
idea.
that might.
Much
Okay,
better
what is your
idea.
better idea?
We're going to leave the criteria in place because it's the criteria that are critical.
Yeah.
But the numbers on the right column hamper us, and that's what I'm hearing. We don't need those numbers to evaluate the criteria. We
There
get
you go.
rid of them.
Mhm.
So it's just strictly,
Because
these are,
I don't want somebody gaming the system and we wind up with somebody with the highest points,
yeah,
but then
Well, and
there's
now,
no coverage in Forciente.
now
And it's-
basically, if I understand it correctly, basically what will come back is a menu, and each item
each
is
one
a
of
different
these,
flavor, basically, and then we get to talk at that point with you and
Right.
CTC.
at
And
that point, CTC will be a party to those discussions,
Got it.
yes.
Okay.
But it
Okay.
would be our discretion that determines how
Yeah, we just
qualified the
strike that.
response is.
We'll
Yeah.
judge them.
That works.
And by sitting on a number of us, that
Yeah.
spreads it out.
okay,
Right, so we removed that from the RFP, the percentages, and are there any other changes that anybody would like?
I'm very excited by your timeline proposed. I know, like many things we're doing, it's aggressive, but we know that the community is ready. So I
We are
appreciate
aggressive.
that.
Okay,
All right, next up, amending chapter 4.
Here we go. So this is really a two-part information. Initially, we offer just pretty minor updates and revisions to chapter 4 and 5, consistent with our project to update every chapter in your book. So, as you know, we have worked a lot on 4 and 5. So in terms of actual updates, it didn't, or they, I'm taking 4 and 5 together, they did not need a lot of updates to reflect on statutory citations or changes such as that. I do bring your attention though to section 4-3402 and obviously chapter 4, where I did make a more substantive change to reflect what I believe has occurred for a number of years, which is that at times, rather than imposing a fine or a suspension or revocation warning is issued. And so I did conform the code to reflect that.
Is that within the minutes? Is that red line version?
Should be.
Because I was
It's in the red line version that's attached, is that what you're wondering?
for
doesn't
3402.
It doesn't show as new, though. It's in A.
What?
It's in subsection
There's no
A.
red line.
Yeah, but is it like red line? I mean, is
No,
it?
that's what I'm saying.
Well,
I don't see a red line.
And
Should be under.
yeah, it's none of it is. That's why when I went through this, I was like,
Oh.
maybe we're just talking in general, but there's actually substantive changes in this.
No, that is the only subject.
Okay, okay. If we could get like a red line version of it, that would be.
Yeah, this one says it's red line, but it's not.
Yeah.
Not fully, anyway.
I mean, there's a couple of places that there's yellow highlighting
Mm-hmm.
on it, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
so I
Some
assumed that I was like,
If
purple.
you go to 4-3402, there's no under.
No.
No, there's
Correct.
not.
no.
Well, that's 3402.
Yep.
Well, I don't know, let's blame that on candidates, but.
Here we go.
All right.
I'll forward that to.
I'm looking for it.
That would be nice.
So that is actually the only true substantive change that we made in 4, and then in 5, we again just did some minor cleanup. But the big piece here is the policy decisions, which really are not part of our code update. And you'll find those items in the memo that we reviewed. So you all have that.
Yes.
Correct.
Under 4.
So we made a number of either recommendations or suggestions. Some of which probably require some discussion. For instance, compressing or eliminating some of the license classifications. Changing the fee structure, lifting or not lifting, but creating a patent license classification. And of course, ongoing discussion, but symbols. Now we also have raised issues about non-transferability, which Amendment you raised as well earlier tonight. And of course, just updating definitions, which really means incorporating by reference, but money that you mentioned, definitions. We do recommend that we incorporate by reference anything in the Indica Control Act that is not actually defined. So if you would like, we could identify a couple of items to focus on tonight.
Mr. Timian.
I would love to have discussion about single serve.
I am
I love it. Are we on the same team?
I think that's a
So-
decent place to start because
Yeah.
it's a long-standing, you know,
Right.
something implemented, something to be looked at.
Yeah.
Right, and we have come before you a couple of times with proposed amendments to that portion code, none of which you all would agree. So we, as part of our revolution, single story. He, of course, is related with every issue that was raised in our memo. We in part analyzed it by looking at your neighbors, what their provisions are on single serve, and of course looking at a variety of other communities to compare other single serve code provisions to yours. You have currently single for beer and malt beverages, single containers of less than 48 ounces are prohibited. For wine, single containers of less than 20 ounces are prohibited. And alcoholic liquor, which is basically everything's singles of less than 6.8 ounces are prohibited. Now, when we get to multiple containers, that lifts to $1 minimum. And in each category, it's a $5 minimum for multiples of that same aggregate. Well, for beer and wine, or beer and malt, it's still 48 ounces. For wine, there's 24 ounces. And for alcoholic liquor, it's still 6.8 ounces. But in multiples, it has to be at least $5. I know that Chief Galt has opinions about the value of a single serve prohibition. As you can see in our memo, a number of communities have various single serve restrictions, and our suggestion is to consider now and that is likely impractical, but that is for a couple of reasons. But primarily because it is very difficult to enforce. We have heard anecdotally on a few occasions now where stores are not really good in enforcing it. And so we believe that in light of that, we might want to consider this amendment. Now, to give Chief Galt his due, he does believe that it has been effective in reducing vagrancy and just drinking on the street and the
Pollution.
behavior problems related to that.
I was wondering if we might just
Well,
turn it over to Chief Galt for a response first before we start.
Well, I was just gonna ask, is the area in which you see this being most effective, is it in the most densely populated area of downtown, or are there other places, or is it mainly downtown?
It's mainly downtown.
Okay.
So if you recall, the reason that I brought this forward was direction from elected officials back in 2019 of the problems that we're having downtown. The city was really struggling with complaints of vagrancy in the parking ramps, Public Works was, and I think they still may be contracting with a company to clean the parking ramps, the stairwells. They were littered with the airline bottles, and other nefarious things that I'll spare you from. So, you know, when we were talking with Ansel Blaney trying to work through this, and if you remember, those of you that were here for that whole thing, we started out with a simpler model and modified it to try to accommodate some of the other, for example, Central store downtown that sells single cans, but they're craft beers that are very expensive. Largely, the problem was driven downtown by single serve. I don't want to call it a specific brand, I guess, but the tall single serve malt beverages or the airline liquors that are $1.99, you know, under $2 maybe. And we were getting panhandling, we were getting people at the tax layer hassled, you know, can you spare $1? And then, you know, and then all this litter, and then the stuff that went on with it. So we had, in 2018, we had 219 intoxication complaints. B2, which is our downtown area from 16th Street West, had 70 complaints. And then inside those police department has different reporting areas. So 3, 5, and 8 had high concentrations of intoxication complaints, and that was primarily in areas that had single can beer that contributed to the behavior. In 2019, we had 206 complaints. Again, B2 had 64 of those, and so, you know, the I don't want to say direction, I guess, but the question that was posed to us is, you know, what could we do to solve this problem? When we implemented this, and I think Alderman Wennett even brought forward that there's some high-level studies that have been done in Minneapolis and Washington, D.C. that you provided me that said that in no areas did crime go up, and we had some significant reductions. So by 2021, we were down to 93 complaints, and it had decreased the intoxication complaints downtown by 71%. You know, so then the question is it pandemic related? Well, I researched Rock Island and East Moline, and their complaints stayed status quo. So to me, I mean, I'm not trying to portray that as a scientific study, but it seems that if the other cities are status quo, we have something different that's reduced by 71%. And I think anecdotally, also, we've seen a change. But to answer your question specifically is, yes, it is geographically an issue. And then I know that when the mayor had brought together a roundtable of liquor licenses, Class Cs, they mentioned that they actually had seen, I don't remember the terms that they used, but loitering had significantly dropped at
outside of their stores.
Outside of their stores.
At like little convenience stores.
Yes.
Yeah. And those were from all over the city, though.
Yes.
Those were not all just downtown or 92 area convenience stores. Mr. Wendt.
So one of the, I mean, based on that data, and I appreciate that could we do, I guess, two things. One, do a overlay, say this is to be instituted in our business district, the B2 zone, the, you know, our downtown area, and then also have a provision in which it does not apply, I guess, for the rest of the, maybe it's not only geographic, but for the rest of the city, you're exempt from it if you have over 10,000 square feet, or, you know, not a convenience store, but that way it would exempt large grocery stores, large, you know, those sorts of things would be exempt from it, but hit the things that actually are of issue, the panhandling at a convenience store and the issues that we've had downtown, and, you know, tailor this thing to be as narrow as possible, but also effective. That's what I
understand the overlay idea. Is that possible legally? It is with cannabis, so why wouldn't it be with
Sure.
alcohol? I'll let you all weigh in. I am the liquor commissioner, but I'll let you weigh in.
Carve out the groceries.
Anybody else? Comments,
I would,
questions? Mr. O'Brien?
I like what the chief had to say with his recommendation. I think, you know, if it actually is making a difference, I don't know why you would vary from that now. I mean, why would you go against something that's been
Well-
successful at driving down the panhandling? Because it happens in my neighborhood. I can tell you, I got 2 liquor stores right below the hill from me. And there's a lot of commotion down there all the time with panhandling and all that stuff. So anything that can eliminate that.
I think, so just so I understand the difference in recommendations, yours is based on enforceability, yours is based on effectiveness.
So
Seems to be.
obviously my job is to respond to in some fashion quality of life issues in our city, and we get them a lot from elected officials, from you representing your various wards, that this is a problem in my neighborhood, or this is a problem downtown, this is affecting business patrons walking to the tax layer, and they're being, you know, so the large part of the problem that we were having in 2018 when I came here was largely around the downtown area.
Yeah.
Particularly a couple of businesses that Alderman Williams probably can name off the top of his head, but for the public record, we'll leave them quiet, that were problematic. We tried voluntary compliance, did not get that. So, I mean, I think that in our business district is, I mean, I can tell you I was really getting a lot of complaints about the parking ramps.
Yeah.
And then, you know, this 4-block area. Occasionally, you know, a grocery store or a liquor store that's tucked into a neighborhood gets that as well. I think that one that Alderman O'Brien is referring to is a little bit unique as opposed to Hy-Vee that's on a commercial.
So your
area.
answer is yes, it's the effectiveness that is the basis of your recommendation.
It's a response to behavior, and I think that that has been effective to the response to behavior that was upsetting at the time.
Yes, Mr.
Well, and if it's having the desired result, I'm not as concerned about the applicability or the enforcement. I mean, they seem to have changed something, and it seems to be working. The concern of why you would exempt like a Hy-Vee or those, it seems like those aren't the problems, and it is for those partners in our community. It's just causing them headaches, and they're getting in fights with their customers who are going through the line and saying, well, what do you mean I got to do this and whatever. If it's not an issue, the person's buying $100 worth of groceries and they're buying one airliner bottle. They're like, well, nope, you can't do that. You have to buy.
We mentioned that earlier a few months ago.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I do have one question for the clerk, and then I'll get to you. When it comes to an overlay and keeping record of who's responsible to this ordinance and who's not, how feasible is that out of your office? Like, it doesn't sound like it would be very difficult to just keep track of who's who.
No, it wouldn't. If you're just like, I just can work with GIS on that.
Got it. Okay. Mr. Schmidt, then Mr. Timian.
And talking about a geographic overlay to keep it enforced in a certain area seems fine. I don't love the way it's written, though. I think just providing that exception on buying the multiple bottles seems really, really strange, and I think makes it harder to enforce and harder to do. And while it would mean certain products would become unavailable, if it's making the difference, I'm not suggesting we bring that back. And if that means you can't buy an airplane bottle of liquor in the city of Moline, then that's what that means.
Well, it's $10.
But I'm also not interested in a geographic overlay could be different because we're responding to a problem area. But I'm not setting it up to say that if you can afford to shop at Hy-Vee, you can buy whatever that you want. And that if you are only able to go down to the corner store, you have a different set of options and a different set of rules. So as we look toward our options for how to adjust or do this, that's not something I'm interested in.
Thank you.
Could I just make one point? So some of the reason that it's written the way it is about the multiple bottles was in response to businesses that came to council, and that was almost a negotiated compromise with those businesses that made those suggestions that said our customers buy multiples or our customers hit this dollar amount. So it was modified, I think, at least 3 times to that, and that was in negotiation with those businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Timmy?
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to mirror what Alderman Schmidt said. I mean, my biggest opposition to this, I have many, but it's mainly that it disproportionately affects the people in our city with the lowest income. Those who can only afford 1 beer, or just at their gas station instead of going to Hy-Vee or whatever it is. And when I think about the pillars that we agreed upon, equity being one of them, or being a part of one of them, I think it is interesting that this is one we can slide, but broadband is not. Where we insist on the full city participation for broadband, but this one's okay. We also insist that if this is having the desired effect, we don't care about enforcement, when just a few months ago, we said if laws aren't being enforced, why do we have them on the books? And so we're really picking and choosing, and this is a very touchy subject, I understand that, but just morally, I think if a law targets one group more than the other, what we're really outlawing is being in that group, not the thing itself.
Okay. Mr. White?
And I agree with you. The enforcement, and maybe I misspoke. What my concern is the outcome, not us following up. I mean, clearly, if we find somebody who's violating it, they should be held accountable. There's no doubt about that. What I'm saying is that the end result is getting what we want. The idea of conflating broadband, which is the way in which children are able to attend school in some situations, to the ability of someone to go in and buy an airplane bottle of liquor, or what we're trying to prevent is panhandle or harass people for donations so that they could go in and buy a airplane bottle of liquor. I reject that premise of conflating those two things at all. What we're trying to do is make our community a better community. And whether we like it or not, liquor's a vice and those sorts of things, and it's not something that we should be encouraging. We should be encouraging broadband, but not necessarily encouraging people. If they want to have liquor, terrific, whatever. But as we have been told, this particular thing is there to prevent the panhandling, and guess what? It works. And so I really believe that this is something. So I guess I'll make the motion, first of all, that we have a overlay for the downtown business district, have staff come back to us with what that looks like when we go through and adopt this Chapter 4, that we apply an overlay, that it absolutely is enforced across the board in that overlay.
So what does, Your Honor?
First off, I'm not sure if we can do motions in informational?
We're just directing staff that when they come back, that this is what we'd like to see.
Okay.
So what does the overlay, what area is that overlay?
They'll come back with it. I think it's based on what they say. They said that it, in my vision, is probably the more dense area downtown. It may be that they say that may be River, Florciente, downtown. It may be, because we have
East Moline border?
Yeah, to East Moline
Let's
border.
ask the sixth ward alderman where he wants to go.
The East Moline border would be good.
And that could be certainly something that we discuss, because we do have other things that go border to border below the bluff and those sort of things. So I wouldn't be opposed.
I would second that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a motion.
Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Vitas, sorry.
In some ways, like, it is much more tolerable to me to move through an overlay. At the same time, I'd be concerned that now we would drive the problem away from one place, and when it's not universally enforced, now all of a sudden we do have a problem in other places. So I don't love the ordinance.
Yes.
I recognize it as a place of compromise. I recognize it as a place of being successful. I personally, conflictedly, say I think I just want to leave it alone, and I'm going to vote against this.
So I have one observation. Wait, Mr. Vitas, you were going
Sure.
to speak.
I was just gonna comment, I mean, the area that you're describing, Alderman O'Brien, and the area that was discussed earlier, simply defines the area of the boundaries of the Renew Moline organization relative to the city. And it goes literally from border to border, from bluff to water. And that basically is the area that I would come back with then. Just throwing that out
Mr. Macias,
there.
you go
That's
ahead,
right.
and then I'll follow.
Good to hear. It doesn't look like it is.
Yeah, so there's some, this kind of reminds me of somebody that is related to someone, and he retired fixed income, would walk to his gas station and get just one beer every now and then. So I wonder what happened to like him and individuals who are on those fixed incomes that do that, but don't necessarily aren't troublemakers or are out loitering. They go back to their home and just drink their beer. I don't know how many of those residents we have, and might be affected by it. So
Well, I obviously as liquor commissioner, we work with whatever you guys decide. I can say, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Where did they go? Oh, along those lines, just a point of reference, I was quite surprised, and Chief Galt knows this because I called him that night. I was in a restaurant up close to Avenue of the Cities, far from downtown, and a vagrant person came in multiple times to bother the people visiting. Police department showed up very quickly and helped the staff help this person. I was very pleased with that response. But it reminded me that issues of vagrancy, etc., are not only in downtown, and that concern that I believe was you mentioned about does an overlay send the issue other places? I mean, I don't know, but I can just tell you what I've observed, right? It quite possibly does. Mr. Williams and Mr. Wendt.
I agree with Alderman Schmidt. I like the idea that you can go to Hy-Vee and spend $100 on groceries and you're denied a small bottle of liquor. But for the people that weren't here, they were urinating and defecating down all over downtown. They're harassing people in the morning as they're going back and forth to work. And just the ongoing problem of drunks around the city. So when people would visit us to go to the tax layer, they're being harassed as they're being parked. They come back to damage. It was pervasive. It was really rising to a point where we, if word got out, it was going to be really, really bad. And it started to. So to address it, Chief Galt came up with this, and Alderman Wendt, I think, and together it works. It actually does. Now, it's no good for the guy that just wants to go down to buy a beer. But, it is a compromise ordinance, and it works. And so I hate to deny anyone a beer. You should be able to, go down and buy a beer or a bottle of alcohol. But when you have alcoholics and you have vagrants and bums running around downtown ruining the investment that this city makes as long as all the businessmen, someone's got to step up, and they did, and it works. And I don't even want to mess with this. I'd hate to tweak it for that very reason.
Mr. Wendt.
So, just so you know, this was my first motion. The next motion I was going to make was for the rest of the city, that it is enforced for anything other than properties of X square footage or larger. So I'm not proposing that we don't enforce it at the places that the mayor
Understood.
had indicated or whatever. But this is just, I'm trying to keep these in line and simple.
Mr.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think there's another consideration. I mean, I hear the vagrancy. I definitely think the alcohol is a symptom of this and not the root cause. Otherwise, there would be vagrants everywhere in every city that doesn't have such an ordinance, and maybe there is, maybe I'm just ignorant to it. But when you think about downtown and our hotel industry, and there are people that want to buy a single small bottle of wine to bring back to their room, they can't do that. They have to buy a 4-pack. So, or a big bottle.
Or $5.
Or, well, I mean, barefoot, one of those little ones. But the point is we're telling them what they can again buy. And I know we currently have a to-go cocktail by the state that will expire. This is potentially, I imagine, hurting some hotel revenue or business from our local stores as well.
We are at about a stopping place, and I think this is a good observation for us. The time it takes to get through a major policy item related to Chapter 4, it was about 40 minutes, right? I am fine. I think you should all take note that we're not under the gun for our code updates. And it is better to have multiple discussion periods over specified topics within each chapter. I think so. Please bear with the staff and administrative and executive branches. We keep putting these conversations together. It feels to me like we've talked out most of the issues. People kind of have their minds made up, and we've had one suggestion to bring back an overlay district and what that would look like. And then the council would just have to vote on that if they want that included. So are we clear on where we're at with this particular topic? Ms. Gustopoulos?
Not quite, because if we do the overlay, are we eliminating that single serve prohibition elsewhere?
No, that's where the part 2 is going to be elsewhere. It's still enforced, but there'll be what I envisioned was a square footage that anything under a certain, it would only apply to anything under a certain square footage in the rest of the city.
And so that, because that would help the Hy-Vees and the Jewels to be able to deal with their customers differently.
Do you want us to suggest for that square footage?
Yes.
Thank you very much for this focused
It just didn't want a
conversation.
situation downtown where somebody buys a warehouse and says, I got all the square footage, so here's your single malt.
They have to get through the approval the
Yeah, I know.
licensure process first. Okay,
So
yes, Mr. Schmidt,
one of those is a motion, one of those is a discussion point, and we've not voted on anything.
that's true.
Yeah, no, I think the overlay is the vote right now, and then
Yeah.
I said I was
Okay.
gonna make the second.
Yeah.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer,
Nay.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Nay.
Schmidt,
Nay.
Williams,
Nay.
Macias,
Nay.
Went,
Aye.
Timian,
Nay.
2 ayes, 6 nays.
So the overlay is
All right,
dead.
the overlay option is not coming forward.
That's dead.
Did you want to go with part 2?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that this only applies to establishments under a certain square footage, which would.
Can we say,
Yeah,
can
like
I
it-
suggest a licensed establishment?
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Licensed liquor establishments, C, CC, and
Triple C.
C, with staff to come back with that amount. And for example, a Jewel or Hy-Vee would be larger than that square footage.
Hang on. Is there a second? Is there a second?
So we're gonna
Okay, then
continue when
That
something,
motion does not pass.
so then I'll make the motion that I had made a while back, that if you're over $25, regardless, this doesn't apply to you.
I'll
So-
second that.
All right, so there's a motion by Alderman Wentz, seconded by Alderman Moyer. Discussion, Mr. Schmidt.
We had received feedback that from the perspective of those selling, that would be nearly impossible for them to even put into their system.
And that's
I agree with you. That's why I think this is
enforceable.
ridiculous that you're making the people going through Hy-Vee buying $100 worth of groceries. They can't buy a single thing of liquor. But
All right,
It's the trade-off, and to fight the problem and to keep things where we want them, and not offer just a new place for vagrancy and a different experience for different people. I'm willing to stand with what we have.
all right. So I don't think there will be much more different discussion on that item
well,
than previously.
other than I don't think there's been any evidence that we've had those issues at the. If we had issues at the large grocery stores at all?
But they could go there if it's now the only place that would offer certain types of sale.
Theoretically, but they also have the staff and everything to deal with it. But
Okay, all in favor?
I
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
We'll just take a roll call vote to be sure.
that's
Alderman
just
Moyer,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Nay.
Waldron,
Nay.
Schmidt,
Nay.
Williams, Macias,
Nay.
Went,
I
Timian,
Nay.
2 ayes, 6 nays.
So nothing's changed.
nothing's changed at all.
I don't think the
Your
ordinance.
recommendation,
Leave it alone.
yeah, it's
Just
all
leave it
fine.
alone, that's what I
Okay,
This, a point of questioning, what is,
Inquiry?
what is a hogshead?
Oh, so I did have to,
Yeah.
it is a bear.
Okay.
Oh, what?
Like
Not
a
Yeah, like
okay,
a
but
wooden
I mean,
barrel.
it's a barrel.
Than a
Okay,
keg.
it's-
It's a barrel.
okay.
oh,
Is it wooden?
yeah.
It can be of any material.
What's it called? This one little bottle?
Yeah.
Come on. Come on.
All right,
Yes.
I appreciate the discussion. We will come back to chapter 4, the next informational, and we'll keep balancing the amount of informationals and presentations we have just to keep our timeline working for getting things done.
I do have an additional motion as it pertains to chapter 4 while we're on it, so I figure it's germane. One of the things we had a
Except, Mr. Wen, I just basically directed us that we're gonna move on.
well, you can do that, but I can make a motion.
Okay,
That we had a very fruitful discussion or lively discussion regarding the definition of primary, regarding establishments in the city on where their income was coming from versus gaming versus if they were a tavern, which should be their primary should be liquor, or restaurants where their primary should be food service. Well, it has come to my attention and through conversation with staff is that there actually is a definition about what incidental is, which is also in the code, which says that if both for a restaurant, if both liquor and gaming would be considered over incidental if it's more than 50%, and for taverns if food and gaming was over 50% of its. So right now, as our ordinance is written, any of those ones that we discussed in which their incidental is over 50%, those things combined technically are in violation of our ordinance. What I would say is that I would make a motion that we do a 6-month moratorium on enforcement of that, which would then give us time for staff to come back and through this chapter 4 changes that we actually figure this out. So we don't have a situation in which it's just not being enforced because we don't want to enforce it. So I make a motion that we have a 6-month moratorium, which lines up with renewals. And so either we fix this or at the next renewal, we'll actually enforce our ordinance.
Second.
second by Alderman Schmidt. Discussion.
So I, having read through those same things, there is actually a definition of primary in
Mhm.
chapter 4 that says the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Were you including both definitions or only one?
Yeah, both. Yeah, the idea of that concept, we'll put a moratorium on enforcement for 6 months so that we either correct it or at the end of that 6 months when we do renewals, they'll have to meet.
Yeah, and I would just comment that those definitions are in chapter 4, and when we previously discussed, we were looking at chapter 5. But they do apply because they apply to the liquor licenses underneath the gaming license.
So I do want to note that we have tried to enforce this and said dental and primary as it relates to gaming and your liquor license. And what we heard in the hearings was that in one instance it was new business and it was not fair to look at their gross revenue in that way because they were just getting started. And another pointed out the pandemic and that, the effect on their business. And so we have tried to enforce this.
And that's why I'm making this motion, because I don't disagree with you. I think that there are some things, and I think that the way it's written is much more draconian than anything I was even proposing. And so that's why I say a 6-month moratorium, and let's fix it in that meantime. I just don't want a situation where nothing happens and basically we're giving direction to staff, don't enforce this stuff.
Well, the goal here was to continue to talk about those types of issues through our discussions of Chapter 4, which are continual, because I said a few minutes ago we were going to continue Chapter 4 discussion. So I'm happy to take that call for that vote. I would also encourage the entire council to read back through Ansel Glink's presentation. There's a PowerPoint that talks about the multi-factor definitions. From where I sit, those definitions matter. So it's not always just about the dollar signs behind something. There is a nice portion in their presentation on that. Mr. Timmy.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would vote against this mostly because there is an enforcement mechanism, and it is the liquor commissioner. And that is a elected official for a reason. I mean,
No,
in terms of
Actually, no,
renewal is what I mean.
Well,
at renewal
yes.
time, right?
Yeah.
You have the ability to
Yeah.
at renewal, deny the
Right.
license.
And I also need to point out to this council, when you talk about consistency of enforcement, I balk at some of those claims because I instituted enforcing the ordinance where we actually train our licensees once a year. That has not been done by previous liquor commissioners
awesome.
at all. So just know that that is happening. And we're trying to do right because that's a relationship, right? You can't expect all the people that come up for liquor hearings, and by the way, I've done multiple of those. I did multiple of those just in a few months that I was quite surprised about. But you can't do that without training them and making sure that they understand what their responsibility is to the citizens and to the city. And so we are slowly but surely getting in line with our expectations. And I just don't think I've had an opportunity to let you know as a whole. There's other pieces of these chapters that are being enforced that have never been enforced. Mr. Wynn.
And I appreciate that. And that's always been my bailiwick, no matter who it, and it's gone back for years. So it's not just in the last year. And send you all the emails about non-enforcement. What I'm saying is, and James and I have talked about it, and I think that's why he seconded it, is that the language says what the language says, and with the data that we know, we need this moratorium. Otherwise, we're basically just saying we're not enforcing it. I don't disagree with you that there is that additional, but that's not until September 30th, which coincidentally is exactly 6 months from today. And so at that point, either we fixed it a different way, or absolutely, that's why I picked that date, is the other option is, all right, we haven't fixed it. You got to enforce what is on the books. And so
Okay.
I'm hoping in the next 6 months we will
Let's
fix this.
take a vote. All in favor of the 6-month moratorium?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Oh, roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Nay.
Waldron,
Nay.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias,
Nay.
Went,
Aye.
Nay.
Timian, 4 ayes, 4 nays.
Aye.
And that motion passes.
All right, we are gonna close out our informationals and move to our, where are we? Public comment. Anybody still around? Sorry, I don't know what got into me.
Where are we?
All right,
Midnight.
council call to order. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, it's probably not fair, Sam, when you see that many informations.
Okay. Alderman Moyer, do you have an invocation? Roll call, please.
Alderman Williams,
Present.
Macias,
Present.
Went,
Present.
Timian,
Present.
Moyer,
Present.
O'Brien,
Present.
Waldron,
Present.
Schmidt.
Present.
Your Honor, request approval of Committee of the Whole, Council and Executive Session Minutes of March 1st, 2022, and Council and Executive Session Minutes of March 15th, 2022. Second reading ordinances. Council Bill 3001-2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 34 Water and Sewers of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Section 34-2111, Service Pipe, by repealing said section in its entirety, enacting in lieu thereof a new Section 34-2111, dealing with the same subject matter.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could we take the Morgan Park off the unanimous consent? I apologize. The way with this Granicus, I was confused. I thought that that's
sorry,
after the
which
omnibus vote
number
to the
is that?
non-consent.
The
It
fifth one.
is
3004, I mean.
5. Resolution 5.
Oh,
Yeah, that,
sorry.
Is that
It's
in the
already-
consent or is it
no,
on the
it's
ninth?
not on the consent,
It's on
on
second.
this
Yeah,
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's why I was a
I'm sorry,
little
I just need the resolution
confused.
number.
2022.
Because non-consent is all the way
1051.
down to
Thank
after
you.
16.
Oh,
Okay.
No,
I will
yeah,
pull
you're
that.
correct.
Yeah,
It's on
I
consent.
apologize. I guess
Okay.
that doesn't start down till 17.
Council Bill 3002-2022, an ordinance enlarging the corporate limits of the city of Moline by annexing thereto certain parcels of land in Rock Island County, Illinois, more particularly described as Van Acker's First Edition subdivision, Lot 6, pin 17-17104007, parcel 0712366, Lot 7, pin 17-17104008, parcel 0712367, Lot 8, pin 17-17104009, parcel 0712368, 4314 7th Street, Moline, Illinois 61265, all situated in the northwest quarter of Section 17, Township 17 North, Range 1, west of the 4th Principal Meridian, South Moline Township, Rock Island County, Illinois. Council Bill 3003-2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 35 Zoning and Land Development of the Moline Code of Ordinances by enacting an amendment to the zoning map, incorporating therein as Section 353103 CKBP LLC parcels and Van Acker's First Edition subdivision as previously read. Council Bill 3004-2022, an ordinance amending Chapter 20 Motor Vehicles and Traffic of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Appendix 10 thereof, parking prohibited at any time, by deleting 26th Street West Side from the alley between 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue to 7th Avenue and adding in lieu thereof 26th Street West Side from 6th Avenue South a distance of 50 feet, and 26th Street West Side from 7th Avenue North a distance of 50 feet, and deleting 27th Street on both sides from 6th Avenue to 12th Avenue, and adding in lieu thereof 27th Street on both sides from 7th Avenue to 12th Avenue. Resolutions. Council Bill 1052-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a local public agency agreement for federal participation to commit local motor fuel tax funds for the local match portion for motor fuel tax section number 19-0027200RS, River Drive overlay from 34th to 41st Streets, and authorizing a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code for MFT section number 19-0027200RS, River Drive overlay from 34th to 41st Street for the amount of $139,000. Council Bill 1053-2022, a resolution authorizing the Fleet and Facilities Manager to purchase a rear loading sanitation truck from Elliott Equipment in Davenport, Iowa, in the amount of $288,438.10. Council Bill 1054-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to approve a programmatic agreement between the City of Moline, the Illinois State Historic Preservation Officer, and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation for certain programs of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Illinois Housing and Development Authority to be administered by the city for the period of April 1st, 2022 through March 31st, 2027. Council Bill 1055-2022, a resolution authorizing the Fleet and Facilities Manager to execute an agreement with Federal Signal Corporation in the amount of $34,100.90 for the purchase and installation of necessary components to retrofit 22 police vehicles to accommodate tablet computers. Council Bill 1056-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a contract with McClintock Trucking and Excavating Incorporated for project number 1367, Trenchless Water Main Project, for the amount of $698,762.95. Council Bill 1057-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a contract with Langman Construction Incorporated for project number 1371, Bypass Sanitary Sewer Project, for the amount of $999,676.50. Council Bill 1058-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an agreement with MetroLink and Shive Hattery for completion of a traffic study on River Drive. Council Bill 1059-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a contract with Five Cities Construction Company for project number 1391, 2022 Inlet and Catch Basin Replacement Program for an amount of $110,300. Council Bill 1060-2022, a resolution approving and accepting proposed changes to prior contract language as agreed to by and between the negotiators for the City of Moline and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 581, related to wages, hours of work, and certain other conditions of employment for the contract term January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2024, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an agreement incorporating said changes with the IAFF Local 581 related to wages, hours of work, and certain other conditions of employment. Council Bill 1061-2022, a resolution authorizing a municipal services general manager to sign a quote from Grisham Industries Incorporated of Davenport, Iowa, for the replacement of the emulsion tank roof. Council Bill 1062-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a purchase agreement with Electric Pump for purchase of the 25th Street Lift Station Control Panel and Variable Frequency Drive, and authorizing the Director of Utilities to procure the panel and VFD from Electric Pump in the amount of $37,551.
Your Honor, I'll move for approval of consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Alderman O'Brien, seconded by Alderman Went. Roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Non-consent agenda resolutions. Council Bill, what was that? That's what we're doing right now. Got it. Thank you. Resolutions. 1051-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an engineering services agreement with Vinstra and Kim Incorporated for design services for project number 1389 Morgan Park Phase 1 and 2 multi-use path for an amount not to exceed $169,313.50.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Macias. Discussion. Mr. Went.
Thank you, Your Honor. I had the opportunity last night, because they called me. There's a neighborhood group that lives up on the other side of Morgan Park, and a number of those residents will be affected. And I had emailed Michael about this as well. I'd like to direct that we add to this agreement 2 items that we will, to the greatest extent possible, keep the existing trees, as well as to the greatest extent possible limit the right-of-way that we request. I'll make that motion, then I'll explain it.
There's a second.
Second.
Second by Alderman Moyer. Discussion.
Yeah, so for instance, one of the initial diagrams that was created by staff that have been circulated a little bit, if we're using these funds, we have to meet the state and federal guidelines, which there's 5-foot setback off the back of curb, 8-foot multi-use path in the areas where we're going to have a retaining wall, a 3-foot buffer between that, and then another 2 foot of the retaining wall. So we wind up being 18 foot off of curb already. But what was diagrammed out was then they were requesting another 7 foot up into the wall. Now, I know that there may be some situations for construction easements or whatever where we're gonna have to dig out, and that is going to happen. But I'd like the guidance to be that we limit the amount that we take as much as possible, and that we limit the number of trees that are taken out as much as possible, because I think that is good governance through this process.
Second.
It was already seconded, right?
Yeah.
So comments, any other comments, and we could certainly have you weigh in. Mr. Moyer?
Thank you. So who determines as much as possible? That just staff discretion then, or?
Well, I think it's staff, but it's also, and I got a commitment from Michael that this will also come to the Complete Streets group as well throughout the process. And so I think it's just important, because when you give guidance to these engineers, if you just say, hey, engineer it, they're going to make it the easiest for them and and meet whatever criteria. Now there will be certain circumstances within this that there may be possibilities to appeal to the state or whoever, the IDOT, who's going to do this, because of the topography or because of the land around it. And I want to encourage these engineers that that's what they do. As much, we may not get everything we want, but I certainly don't want to give them the direction of just go ahead and build it how you want, and no matter how much expensive, and we wind up with what we've got, as we used to call it, the Alderman Parker wall on 12th, which is probably not the best engineered wall by the or eyesore that we've got by the John Deere building, our house.
Did you have something?
Yeah,
And then we'll turn it over to you.
And there's, in particular, at the very end, the very last house, it's got some really nice old pine trees that are right on the edge, and I know it's going to be difficult, and it provides some privacy. And a lot of the people that live there love to watch the deer. There's tons of deer there, and they even put up their own signs too. Watch out for the deer. So,
and there could be a possibility, because it had been talked about at one point before, about converting that to a one-way. So maybe we use half of that road.
Well, we'll have to come back to any of that,
But this is exactly what we're talking about. You could come in and you could engineer it to swipe out everything, or you could get creative and encourage the engineers to design it in a way that would limit those impacts.
Michael?
Yes, first I'd like to say, some engineers do that and others don't.
Right.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I did answer your question in regards to, I sent you back an email.
Yep.
I did state that I think it's a great idea to limit the amount of trees that are taken out.
Mhm.
That would be a good thing for this path. There's no reason to clear cut and just mow down everything just because it's there, okay? They shouldn't do that. It's an area that should be preserved. The trees definitely need to be preserved. And the other thing is that they also should try to limit themselves as to how much right-of-way they have to have in order to construct the path. They don't need, they should use the minimum amount that they need in order to construct the path. Those are my two recommendations that would go on.
And that is in accordance
Exactly
with
what-
what he has just
Yes,
motioned.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And
Anything further?
the other issue is that, yes, we will be presenting it back to the Complete Streets Committee. It'll be at the conceptual and then the pre-final submittals. That way they can develop what they feel are the ultimate concepts to best develop the path, and then that way the Complete Street Committee can then weigh in on those different options that they'll present and come up with the best solution that satisfies all the requirements in the recommendations.
Thank you.
And if I recall, there's also, which isn't always in these, there is a call out for a meeting with the neighbors and the
Yes, there
those
is.
affected,
There is
which-
that too.
which I really appreciate.
Okay, let's keep raising hands and keeping ourselves on track. Mr. Waldron.
Just want to let everybody know I will not support anything on amendments or this project. I believe this is a solution looking for a problem. I don't think this is money well spent. We have many, many other infrastructures around town that need to be fixed, and this, to my mind, is a very low priority. If you're going to try to convince me that people walk to school, sure, there are some people walk to school, but I would encourage you to take a look at how many people walk to school. It is next to zero. And just get out there and take a look. Once again, I tell you, this is a solution looking for a problem, and I won't support it.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
I couldn't agree more. It will absolutely butcher Morgan Park. It will just turn it into a pass through. It would no longer have a woodsy appeal. It won't have, it's a disaster. You'll never be able to plow it. You'll never be able to keep it. It'll become even more of a raceway and a cut through for the drunks on 7th Street to get up to other places we won't mention. It's just I just think it's a bad idea. It takes away some of the things that make Moline somewhat unique. Morgan Park's always been a kind of a woodsy little country drive with deer right up to the roadway, and people take ownership on both sides with the neighborhood, and to come through and pave it through for no other reason than kids do not walk to school through Morgan Park. I know that was stated in the past. Garfield kids do not walk to Hamilton through Morgan Park. I live at the end of it. I watch people. They do not go up and down. And that's one of the things that is attractive about it. It divides one part of the city from another. You have to go around to 19th or cut through John Deere or go down another way. I don't think this is a benefit to us in any way to spend that kind of money to
Is
do
this
it.
money that's been given from Bi-State, though? Do we not have
Yeah,
a grant
this is
from
a grant.
Bi-State for this?
There's matching.
TASA
Matching,
grant.
I got it. Mr. Moyer.
Thank you. So I grew up in this neighborhood, and we walked up and down Morgan Park, and I still do cleanup efforts and other things down there. And I would agree, only about 4 to 5% of kids walk to school today. On the other hand, on the weekends and the evenings, people are walking there, and I think this is a perfect place to have a path. So I'm going to support it.
I do believe, and I hear your disagreements. I'm not weighing in. I'm just trying to remember clearly that I think in the stuff we did at Prospect Park with our stickies, etc., that this path through Morgan Park was brought up there. That could be one person. I'm just pointing out. I think that it was part of that community engagement. In any case, Mr. Wendt and Mr. Ramos.
And I don't disagree with you. There's not a lot of kids that walk through there, but it's also, when they were doing the bridge, there's not a lot of people driving from Devil's Glen to Kennedy Drive because there is no bridge right there. There's no place for kids to walk through now. Once this opens up, there will be. And to your point about walking to school, I don't disagree that the amount of kids that walk to school is less than it used to be. But when Garfield closed, you now have a situation, when I was growing up, all my friends were at Garfield and that's who you hung out with. But now, because you have to go to Hamilton, now half of your friends live on the other side of it. And so there will be, and there is, people that live
in Alvaro's neighborhood that now have really good friends that are on the other side. And if the idea is, well, you got to go around to Mr. Homegrown and up and around, or you got to go to 19th and cross over there, I think we're doing a disservice to our residents. This is something that needs to be done. When I talk with the neighbors, the ones that are going to be affected, you know, even though they're like, oh God, this is going to, they all agreed, yes, this needs, because they go down there and it's not safe. Some of them run through there and they're like, I feel like I take my life in my hands every time. Now, to the point of it being a raceway, I don't disagree. And there's some traffic calming things that we've talked about doing, and we may have to do more of down in that neck of the woods to do it. But certainly to make this safer for kids to pass through and to complete our community bike paths and bikeways is essential.
Mr. Macias and then Mr. Schmidt.
And yeah, I live like 2 blocks away from there. I actually used to live on 7th Street, and when I used to run a lot more, that was my running path because I love running by the trees. It's a beautiful spot, and if you do put a walkway, I guarantee you all the families are going to be using it. A lot more people are going to be using it, and I see it more of a placemaking thing than a path for kids to go to school because a lot of the kids get dropped off. It is a very small number, but the neighbors are going to use it. I used to use it, and yeah, it was a little dangerous, but it was just me running. But if there was a path, I would gladly push the stroller with my baby and my family and go all the way to the other side. It is truly I see it as a placemaking aspect and highlighting the beauty of Morgan Park.
Mr. Schmidt.
I don't know about the kids and that piece of the argument, but I do know that I've actually had 3 constituents talk to me about wanting this path. 2 of them in the last week. One of them actually was a Cub Scout, and their exact talking about it was looking for a place in the city of Moline to walk through with that woody feel, and that is just the perfect place. It feels like if you're riding through on a bicycle, you're going to be making that sort of a transport. That's kind of what they were looking for. So the feedback I've heard has been positive in the direction of wanting this, even when I wasn't even bringing it up. But like I said, twice in the last week and once earlier in the year, I've heard about it. So I'm going to support it.
Okay. Are we ready to call the question? You got another?
Just from the few people, quite a few people that I've spoken with in the first ward, when they've learned of it, don't think it's a very good idea. And I think we should listen to the citizens before we pull the trigger on this.
Thank you. Hearing no further discussion on this, roll call, please.
On the amendment?
Oh, on the amendment.
Oh, shoot, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The
Alderman-
amendment to limit, et cetera.
Yep.
Right, limit the trees.
Alderman Moyer,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Nay.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Nay.
Macias,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
6 ayes, 2 nays.
Okay, so now we're back to
The amended,
the motion, or the amendment. What the heck?
the amended
No.
motion.
It's after 9:30, people. The motion, the program itself, funding
Stick with
itself.
me, boys. It's 44
Any
years.
further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Nay.
Waldron,
Nay.
Schmidt,
Plan on voting nay.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Nay.
Macias,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
I thought you
5
said
ayes, 3
nay, so
nays.
The mayor had to vote.
That motion passes. Number 17, is that where we're at?
Would've been
Council Bill
ideal.
1063-2022. A resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a program funding agreement between the city of Moline and the Illinois Housing Development Authority for the city's acceptance of converting $45,000 in abandoned property program grant funding to the Strong Communities Program Round 1.5 grant. That the city shall enter into the funding agreement with the Illinois Housing Development Authority and do all things necessary to execute all assurances and certifications to the Illinois Housing Development Authority for the Strong Communities Program Round 1.5 grant, and authorizing the Community and Economic Development Department to begin work upon execution of the program funding agreement between the City of Moline and the Illinois Housing Development Authority for the Strong Communities Program Round 1.5 grant, and do all things necessary to implement said grant requirements.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Alderman Moyer, seconded by Alderman Timian. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Council Bill 1064-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to approve of the termination and further funds from the Abandoned Properties Program, Round 5, funded by the Illinois Housing Development Authority, IHDA.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Moyer. You're getting lulled into sleep, you guys. Roll call, or discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Council Bill 1065-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a First Amendment to a grant agreement between the City of Moline and the Illinois Housing Development Authority for the city's acceptance of $50,000 in additional grant funding, and to do all things necessary to execute all assurances and certifications to the Illinois Housing Development Authority for the Land Bank Capacity Program.
Motion to approve.
That's fine. I've read enough.
Timian and, that was Timian and
Thank you.
Moyer. All right, discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer. O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
Speed
That
round.
motion passes. Council Bill 1066-2022, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement providing for the Rock River Valley Regional Sewer System.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Alderman O'Brien, second by Alderman Went. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Council Bill 1067-2022, resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an intergovernmental agreement as amended with the city of Silvers for supply of potable water.
Motion to approve. Second.
As amended.
As amended.
I said as
She did say it's amended.
We all, we're all in different places, okay. You said as amended, thank you. Who motioned? Mr. Timian, seconded by Alderman Schmidt, thank you. Roll, discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Council Bill 1068-2022, a resolution authorizing revisions requested by the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, IEMA, and Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and approval and adoption of the Rock Island County Multi-Jurisdictional Local Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Move to
Come
approve.
on, guys.
Motion by Alderman Went,
Second.
second by Alderman Williams, discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
Timian.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes, and that is all I have this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, keeping in mind, it is 9:45. If there's anything that can wait, it might be okay. We do meet next week. I am gonna start things off, as the code says I can. I first want to send a sincere thanks to our staff for all the work they did to put the State of the City together. It turned out well. I don't think I got to thank them last week, or maybe I did when we had the roundtable. But anyway, thanks all around, but also thanks to our community partners that helped us put that on. Secondly, just a reminder that if you're interested in helping with the social media on the Mayor's Water Challenge, please reach out to Tori. Feel free to attend a kickoff Friday at 10. He's going to be sending out a media statement tomorrow about that. And we'll be at the library, Andy Pear and I and Misty, I think, or wait, Misty will be there Friday, Misty might be there Saturday, I'm not sure, but we're gonna be doing a sign-up drive and education stuff at the library from 10 to 12. So And I also just wanted to say, and please, Mr. Vitas, if you wanted to fill in any blanks, the plans for the Moline 150 celebration, I'm impressed at how they're proceeding. We have meetings every other week, I believe it is, with the steering committee. It's going to be really exciting. There's a lot of good organization around that, and I think you know, it won't only stimulate economic activity for downtown businesses. I think we'll have pathways for people from across the city to be a part of that and enjoy that as well. So that's all I have. Mr. Williams.
I'll be quick. I'll ask Alderman Waldron to join me chaining ourselves to trees down in Morgan Park.
And bring your snow shovel, because no one's gonna shovel it.
But I just let everybody know, we spoke about food licenses some time back, and it kind of slipped through the cracks as far as the sliding fees for places like Katie's Market and Jerry's Market and the smaller businesses versus the larger ones, because it's still based on square foot. I was going to send Bob a nice long email, and I'll try to contact you guys individually, but we'll come up with a strategy or an idea anyhow to readdress that. But
Okay.
Are you gonna send the email?
I'll send you the email.
Okay, great.
I sent you an email too, a while back.
Okay.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Went.
Yeah, I'll send an email.
We're sending
Mr. Timian.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Moyer.
I forgot, nothing.
Mr. O'Brien.
An honest response.
Nothing, Your Honor. I just think it's ironic that you can't buy a bottle of airplane booze on an airplane anymore. As somebody who's recently flown. And that's when you need a bottle.
You're a vagrant. And you can't even
I would
carry
be a
it through
vagrant.
security.
If you can afford an airline ticket, you can buy a six-pack.
Mr. Waldron.
Yes, Your Honor, real quick. April 1st is Friday. Traditionally, that is the kickoff for construction season. And I was wondering if I could get from staff a timeline on our projects this year. When are they going to go? Typically, by this time, I would have seen the sign up. This road is going to close the week of April 4th, and I haven't seen any of those around town. And last year, we had a real problem with projects that slipped away to nowhere land. And so I would like to see a timeline listing of what this year's CIP projects are and when are they going to go? Because I haven't seen this road is going to close.
Well, there's already a few that slipped to next year.
At least I'd like to know that, please.
CIP timeline, you
Yeah.
shall have it.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I haven't
Thank
seen
you.
one before, so I'll get it.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, Your Honor. I just would like to take my opportunity to say that I met last week with a group of Cub Scouts, fifth graders who are in the Weeblos Arrow of Light year. And they spent an hour and 15 minutes engaged with me and asking questions and bringing up very salient issues. And I just want to state publicly that the Arrow of Light Scouts from Pack 109 were an excellent group and were probably my favorite meeting so far as an alderman. And I just think that with them as our future, I feel like we're in good hands. I want to share that with everyone.
Thank you.
Good to remember, I was the covenant.
All right. Anything from staff?
I think the only thing I would mention to everyone is that things are moving forward with the DOT project regarding the lighting on our side of the eastbound travel lanes of I-74. They're still addressing the signs, Alderman Went, that you brought up, that has not been forgotten. I agree with you on that. And the Oculus has been installed properly, finally. So it's there, the benches are installed, so the overlook is getting finished. There's some nomenclature about destinations, including probably our name, that hasn't gone up yet. Those are going up. And the plans are probably mid to late October to officially do something. Will probably be early May. It's kind of an official ribbon, but a soft opening is what we want because we don't want to be inundated with.
You don't want on
thousands
day
of
one,
people.
3,000 people trying to go
No.
down?
Absolutely
It
not.
will be busy for sure.
We need to know that people can get up and come down and things are safe. And then after that, those who have done it probably won't show up. The regular users won't show up when all of the once in a lifetime users come up to take a look and then don't want to go back up and down again. So we're working on it. All the contracts are out for bid. I mean, as I understand from DOT, that the landscaping is going out, the demolition's going down. Demolition is probably sometime in mid to late December, going into January after the channel closes. That's when they'll bring the old bridge structure down. Landscaping will happen this year, and then there's still some work that'll go into 2023, believe it or not. So we got a ways to go before it's all done. I'm just sharing that with you, and that's the most recent update.
You gotta plan
Thank
for
you.
And we have public safety issues we have to talk about too. I brought that up in the meeting, getting up there to service those in need.
Okay, thank you.
That's that for now.
Get an
Public
ambulance golf
comment,
cart.
one last round,
You're gonna need
nope,
a combo.
no executive session, correct?
Correct.
Need a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Schmidt, second by Williams, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Alderman